Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Sisette Abigail. Sisette Abigail was born in 1996 in Mexico. At 21, she met Luis Alfonso Alvarez Lopez, a 31-year-old man, also from Mexico. They eventually decided to live together in an apartment located in Building 27 on Paseo de la Reforma, in Colonia Tabacalera, Cuauhtémoc District, Mexico City, where Luis worked as the building administrator. Luis is a con artist, especially targeting women. He used deception to manipulate women into giving him money. While some considered him attractive, his true skill lay in his ability to manipulate others. He often fabricated tragic stories about his family to gain sympathy and achieve his goals. In one case, he swindled about $6,000 from a young woman by claiming his brother had been kidnapped by a group. In another instance, he convinced a girlfriend that he wanted to marry her and asked for money to buy an apartment where they would live together. However, he never purchased the apartment, disappeared with her savings, and the wedding never occurred, despite her having an engagement ring. Luis pulled off one of the most daring scams by faking his own death 3 times, earning him the nickname the Lord of Swindles. These incidents took place in 2016. The first incident occurred on May 19th, when he circulated his photo, shows that he was one of the victims of the Egyptair Flight 804 crash. The second fake death happened on June 12th, during the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida. The third incident occurred on June 28th, when another social media user shared his photo, claiming he was their brother, who had gone missing after the Istanbul airport attack in Turkey. Following these incidents, Luis' image went viral on social media and was picked up by international media. Days after Luis' third fake death, French media began investigating the situation. They were curious about how the same photo appeared in 3 separate tragedies and whether Luis himself was behind the posts or if someone else was responsible. It was revealed that Luis did not post his photo online. Instead, individuals to whom he owed money shared it. These people accused him of being a fraud and tried to ruin his reputation, they portraying him as a liar. French media contacted some of them, and one explained how Luis had manipulated others. On May 19th, when the Egyptair plane disappeared into the sea, a user on a social network shared Luis' photo, claiming it was their brother, Luis, who had been on the plane. This misinformation somehow reached the BBC. The BBC later published this information. However, the following day, after verifying the passenger list and realizing the error, the BBC retracted the story. One victim of Luis said she sued him for fraud, but she never got her money back. Frustrated, she decided to post his photo online so that everyone would recognize him as a scammer. Concerning the nightclub attack in Orlando, a reputable newspaper edited a video to show Luis as one of the victims. The newspaper also reported that the incident may have been an attempt to frame him. A French TV station managed to interview Luis, giving him a chance to defend himself. During the interview, he admitted that he had unresolved fraud cases in Mexico. However, he explained that he had not filed complaints against those who shared his photo because news in Mexico was of little importance to him and did not affect him. Through these incidents, Luis managed to win over Sisette, just as he had charmed other women. He persuaded her to move in with him. She was very happy because this was the first time she lived with a man, and she believed he would become her lifelong partner. However, things did not go as she had hoped. Initially, everything seemed fine, but over time, Luis revealed his controlling behavior. He prohibited she from having friends and prevented her from contacting her family or colleagues. He forbade her from working and essentially kept her confined at home. Her only role was to assist him with some administrative tasks related to the building. Beyond that, she had no interaction with anyone else. This isolation led to frequent arguments. Over time, the situation got worse, and Luis abused her. The tragedy began on Friday, September 18, 2020. Sisette spoke to her parents for the last time, promising to join them for lunch on Sunday, September 20th. However, she never showed up. She stopped responding to calls or messages, which deeply worried her parents. They reached out to Luis, but he claimed he didn't know her whereabouts. He explained that they had argued because he had gone to visit his mother in Tala without taking Sisette along. Even when relatives visited Luis' home, he insisted she wasn't there. Although concerned, but Sisette's parents initially believed Luis. However, they found it very unusual that she had left without informing anyone, and they couldn't reach her. Their calls went straight to voicemail. It became clear over time that her phone had been turned off. Extremely desperate, her family began searching for her by contacting friends and colleagues. Former colleagues and others have posted her photo on social media, appealing for information to help find her. Sadly, the search yielded no results, and it seemed as though she had vanished without a trace. Left with no other choice, her parents decided to ask the police for help. When Luis learned that Sisette's parents were filing a complaint, he didn't object, but refused to go with them, saying he needed to take his dog to the vet. This confused Sisette's mother, who could not understand why he was so indifferent to the disappearance of Sisette, the woman he always claimed to love. Others also began to suspect him. During police questioning, Luis stated that at the time of Sisette's disappearance, he was in Tala with his mother. While he had an alibi, the police were struck by his lack of concern over Sisette's situation. On September 25, 2020, the Prosecutor General's office ordered a search for Sisette, who is still missing. Investigators, along with her family, spent 3 weeks searching, checking morgues and other locations, but found no clues. Eventually, they decided to return to the building where Sisette lived with Luis to conduct a more detailed search. On October 9, Sisette's body was found wrapped in a sheet, lying inside the same building where she lived with Luis, at apartment number 1006. Initially, there were no visible signs of a struggle in the room, no blood or evidence of a fight. However, when investigators used luminol, it became apparent that this was the crime scene. They uncovered numerous bloodstains that had been cleaned up. The stains trailed from the main room to the bathroom, suggesting the body had been dragged between rooms. A large cleaned-up pool of blood was also found. Based on this evidence, a murder investigation was launched. Sisette's body was sent to a medical facility for further examination. The results showed that she had been brutally beaten all over her body. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation. Luis became the primary suspect in the case, because he was the last person to see Sisette alive. He had reason to hide her body in the building, as he was the manager of the place, and their strained relationship made the motive all the more obvious. The police began searching other apartments in the building, including the apartment where Luis lives. There, they discovered some of Sisette's belongings, along with a significant quantity of illegal substances. Luis was discovered to be in possession of 50 bags of illegal drugs, along with 11 bank cards and an identity card. DNA tests and fingerprint analysis were conducted to determine whether Luis had been in the apartment where Sisette's body was discovered. DNA analysis from the crime scene confirmed traces of both Luis and Sisette, and his fingerprints were also found on her body. Investigation agency in Mexico City have issued an arrest warrant for Luis. At that time, he was in prison for possession of illegal drugs. During a hearing for the drug charges, Judge Landarange granted Luis conditional release, requiring him to post bail and report every 15 days. However, during the same hearing, the Bureau of Investigation issued a warrant for his arrest for Sisette's murder. Judge Hector Fernando Rojo San Pacheco issued the warrant, and Luis was arrested again. This time, he was transferred to the Eastern Detention Center, where he will be held until his trial for the Syset murder case takes place. The hearing was delayed due to Luis' health issues. However, on November 8, he was officially charged with murder. The court accepted all the evidence presented by the prosecutor, identified him as involved in the crime, and confirmed his pre-trial detention as a precautionary measure. Furthermore, a 2.5-month deadline has been set to complete the further investigation. This information was widely spread, and details about his past as the Lord of Swindles began to be made public. A photo of him began to be distributed, prompting many acquaintances to share what they knew about him. One of these individuals was Luis' ex-girlfriend, Anna. She said they met online in 2010 but only met in person in 2012. She claimed to have witnessed numerous fraudulent schemes he orchestrated to deceive people. She explained that his scams had enabled him to live a lavish lifestyle, allowing him to afford a luxury apartment and car. He often flaunted his wealth to impress his friends. Despite his efforts to mingle with wealthy individuals, he was looked down upon. According to Anna, he had been involved in scams since he was 18. Him telling her how he began by posting fake ads for mobile phones online, tricking people into paying without ever delivering the products. Anna explained that Luis had deceived many people using various methods. He told her that his father had passed away and left him a company, but she later discovered this was a lie. She claimed to have seen his phone and saw him chatting with many people using fake names. Additionally, she revealed that he was cruel to animals, such as attaching rockets to cats and burning dogs. Anna claimed that Luis stayed at her house for a while after undergoing plastic surgery, during which her dog, Bruno, was often with him. She recounted coming home on several occasions to find her dog frightened and limping. Once, she noticed her dog had urinated on the bed, something he had never done before. She also observed that the dog could not walk properly, was struggling to breathe, and had a broken back leg. She immediately suspected Luis, but he denied harming the dog. However, a veterinarian later confirmed that these injuries were caused by abusive behavior. In Anna's view, Luis' cruelty to animals was what eventually led him to start abusing people. She said that while they were still together, she to suspect that he was showing signs of mental illness and was convinced that he was responsible for Cezette's death. Although authorities had enough evidence to show that Luis was the one who killed Syset, her family and friends had to wait nearly 3 years to see justice served. His legal team used various tactics to delay the trial. During this time, Cezette's parents actively participated in rallies demanding justice. Finally, on April 28, 2023, the Supreme Court of Mexico found Luis Alfonso Alvarez Lopez guilty of murder. He was sentenced to 39 years, 4 months, and 15 days in prison. Although he was only sentenced to a minimum of 39 years in prison, while the maximum sentence could have been up to 70 years, but Cezette's parents felt that the result was fair and they were satisfied with it. Finally, after a long process, justice has been served. Luis is now in prison. This can be considered the best outcome, considering the dangers he has caused to society. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kendra Hatcher. Kendra Hatcher was born on February 3, 1980, in Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois, to Reagan Hatcher and Bonnie Gibson Jameson Cawley. Her parents divorced, and her mother remarried Bruce Jamon. Kendra had 3 sisters, Jamie Kalman, Ashley Lipham, and Melissa Jameson, and 1 brother, Neil Hatcher. She grew up in Pleasant Plains and pursued her studies in dentistry there. Following her divorce in 2010, she relocated to Dallas and started working at Smile Zone Dental Studio. Kendra, who had a strong Christian faith, aimed to use her dental skills to help others. The clinic, for instance, offered free services to disadvantaged children. In her free time, Kendra taught Bible studies and took part in volunteer programs, which involved building churches abroad and offering free dental care to children in Ecuador. Her career quickly took off, and her solo life thrived. On May 24, 2015, Kendra started dating Dr. Ricardo Paniagua. They met through a dating app, and from their first date, they became inseparable. Both shared similar values and interests and wanted the same things in life. Ricardo was completing his dermatology residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Despite having been in a relationship for just a few months, he and his girlfriend were already talking about getting married. Unfortunately, a tragic incident in a parking lot claimed her life, ending all their future plans. Investigators who arrived at the massacre site assessed the crime scene and initially suggested a robbery, as Kendra's purse and some valuables were missing. Beside her body, they discovered bullet fragments and a gun magazine. However, evidence from the shooting shifted the focus away from robbery. Kendra was shot twice. One bullet hit her back and another struck her head. The entry wound was at the top of her head, exciting through the chin, suggesting that Kendra had her hands raised behind her head when she was shot. The murder theory was confirmed after the police obtaining CCTV footage, which helped reconstruct the events. The footage shows a black Jeep Grand Cherokee entering the parking lot at 7:15 p.m. Half an hour later, Kendra arrives home and parks in the same garage. A few minutes later, a man comes up to her, shoots her, and runs to the side, then jumps into the moving black Jeep. The videos were of poor quality and the crime scene couldn't be seen in them. The attackers couldn't be identified, but the vehicle was put on the wanted list. It was decided to release the images of the Jeep and the driver captured by the cameras to the media. The authorities asked the public for help, and that turned out to be effective. A man named Jose Luis Ortiz got in touch with the police. He reported that the car in the images was his, but made it clear that he wasn't involved in the shooting and wasn't drive. The vehicle. When questioned, Jose explained that on the morning of September 2nd, two of his friends, Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez, asked him to fix their car and requested to borrow his Jeep until the evening. Jose agreed. He mentioned that later that evening, Brenda called Jose to a restaurant. That same evening, Crystal drove the Jeep come back to Jose's house. Therefore, the man was quite surprised when he saw his Jeep in the news. When Jose saw his Jeep on a TV show, he asked Brenda about it. At first, she said it was a different Jeep on the screen. Then, Brenda mentioned that Crystal had been traveling for work, and she didn't know anything about it. Brenda advised Jose not to tell anyone and just repaint the Jeep. Brenda agreed to pay for the Jeep to be painted. Meanwhile, Jose was waiting for a decision on his U.S. citizenship and wanted to avoid any issues with the police. He understood that Brenda had tricked him, so he went back to the police department to testify. He police monitored all the Jeep's movements that day and identified the two young women whom Jose had mentioned. Brenda Delgado was the first person investigators questioned. She claimed she didn't know Kendra and had never seen her before. When asked about her whereabouts on September 2nd at 7:42 p.m., Brenda provided an alibi, stating that she was at a restaurant with Jose and even presented receipts for the dinner. This raised questions about why someone would keep dinner receipts for so long. Eventually, with detailed investigation, the concealed truth behind the crime was uncovered. The central figure in the investigation was Brenda. She was born into a modest family, Luis and Maria Alato, who immigrated to Dallas from Mexico. Her father worked in a factory. They settled in a low-income neighborhood in southeast Dallas, where Luis found a job in construction, and Maria worked at the U.S. Post Office and cleaned houses. Brenda was their second child and only daughter. She was an excellent student, well liked by her teachers, and worked part-time at a flower shop and as a waitress. Brenda was very ambitious and dreamed of attending medical school, but unfortunately, her parents couldn't afford the high tuition fees. After graduating from Skyline High School in 2000, she continued to live with her parents while dreaming of a prosperous and beautiful life. To achieve her goals, Brenda worked diligently. She was employed as a dental assistant and also worked at a department in North Park Center. In 2012, Brenda met Ricardo Paniagua and fell in love with him. Their first date, a dream come true for her, was at a Jennifer Lopez concert. In November 2012, just 3 months after meeting, Brenda moved in with Ricardo at his home in Fitzhugh Urban Flats. Ricardo was equally captivated by Brenda and even made an effort to meet her parents. In 2013, she posted on Facebook for his birthday. Brenda later found out she was pregnant, but at Ricardo's urging, she ended the pregnancy, which left her heartbroken. A bit recovered from the decision, Brenda decided to focus on her career and her beloved Ricardo. In the fall of that year, she started attending Sanford. Initially, it appeared that Brenda had moved past the emotional impact of the breakup, but this wasn't true. Her reliance on Ricardo intensified. When Ricardo shared a photo online with his new partner Kendra, who resembled a model, Brenda might feel jealous. Investigators, after gathering details about Brenda and her life, concluded that she had a motive to remove her rival. Ricardo confirmed that Brenda was his ex-girlfriend. They had an on and off relationship from 2012 to 2015, the relationship ending a few months before Ricardo met Kendra. Ricardo believed that he and Brenda remained friends and didn't see any issues between Brenda and Kendra. After all, he had dated other women before meeting Kendra, so why would meeting her affect Brenda? Brenda believed she had come up with the perfect plan to win back her ex-boyfriend and eliminate Kendra from his life. She started by offering him support and showed interest in his relationship with Kendra. In reality, she was aware of all their future plans, and Ricardo mistakenly thought her interest was genuine. Unfortunately, men often misunderstand women and sometimes trust them blindly. Brenda had been plotting her own plan for months. She had opened Ricardo's mail and knew all his plans with Kendra, even when and where they had booked tickets. All of this was infuriating to Brenda. She wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher, sincerely believing that she had taken Kendra's place. Brenda transferred Ricardo's account to her phone to monitor him closely. Following Ricardo and Kendra became her main focus in life. She became obsessed with stalking them, eventually quitting her job to dedicate all her time to this pursuit. Over time, Brenda developed a sinister plan to kill Kendra, whom she despised. To carry out this plan, Brenda approached several acquaintances, offering them money to harm Kendra. A mutual acquaintance introduced her to Crystal Cortez, a 21-year-old single mother facing severe financial difficulties. For just $500, Crystal agreed to help her. Following Brenda's instructions, Crystal contacted Christopher Love, who agreed to carry out the crime. Crystal gave Christopher $500 from Brenda along with 2 types of illegal substances. Kendra was being followed by 2 women who wanted to learn her habits and daily schedule to choose the best time and place for their crime. On September 2, 2015, they used Jose's car. Crystal and Christopher waited for Kendra in the parking lot. They didn't follow her home from work because they were worried about getting stuck in traffic. That evening, they successfully carried out their plan. A few days after the crime, Crystal and Christopher were arrested. The suspects denied their guilt and being at the crime scene. However, things changed when Christopher was found with the gun that killed Kendra in the side compartment of the car. Crystal, on the other hand, was nervous and constantly confused in her testimony, giving different testimony about why the SUV appeared in various parts of the city. In the initial questioning, Crystal confessed to being the driver in the parking lot. However, she insisted that she was forced there by an armed carjacker who had entered her SUV and made her drive. Trying to appear innocent, she falsely stated that her son was with her in the car. This claim was later disproved as security cameras did not show any child present. During the interrogation, as more evidence emerged, Crystal altered her testimony and sought to negotiate with the investigators. She agreed to testify against Brenda in exchange for a reduced sentence. Crystal informed the police that Brenda wanted Kendra dead and that the crime was Brenda's idea. Crystal stated that within 2 weeks of meeting Brenda, they started planning the crime. The CE found out that Brenda wasn't just sad because her relationship with Ricardo had ended, she was obsessed and desperate to win him back. She pretended to be happy about being his loyal friend, but her life started falling apart. She began to resent Kendra, believing she had taken her place. According to Crystal, it was at this moment that Brenda decided she wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher. That's when a plan to commit the perfect crime hatched in Brenda Delgado's mind. During her testimony, Crystal explained how Brenda came up with the perfect crime and enlisted her help. Together, Brenda and Crystal started planning to kill Kendra. They met several times and came up with various plans. The initial idea was to inject Kendra with illegal drugs or sedatives and then dispose of her. Brenda knew she needed a trustworthy accomplice to avoid suspicion, so she began the search. They drove through the rundown neighborhoods and asked several people for assistance. This is how they met Christ Ofer. He agreed to help and played a significant role in planning the details of the crime. The three of them decided together that the quickest way to kill her was to shoot her. During their collaboration, Crystal disclosed that September 2nd was intentionally selected. Brenda was aware that Kendra and Ricardo were planning a trip to Mexico, so they decided to eliminate her before the vacation. Brenda told Crystal she wanted the crime to appear as a failed robbery. Next, the criminals then selected the location for the murder. For days, they meticulously followed Kendra's movements, recording her every minute to ensure nothing altered for the chosen day. After her work hours, they tracked her path home and planned how to subtly access the apartment complex's secure parking garage. On September 1, 2015, they conducted a final check. On the morning of the crime, Brenda and Crystal picked up the Jeep from Jose and then picked up Christopher. Brenda was dropped off at the library in Caro Wilton to create an alibi, while Crystal and Christopher headed to Kendra's apartment complex. They waited across the street for about 30 minutes before driving to Kendra's workplace. After failing to follow her due to traffic, they went back to the house to wait. When Kendra arrived home, Christopher, wearing gloves, got out of the car, approached her with a gun, and shot her as she exited her vehicle. Crystal mentioned that she didn't witness the shooting but heard it. After that, she drove Christopher home, picked up her son from his grandmother, and later met Brenda at Jose's house to give him the Jeep. As a result, Brenda's dream was fulfilled. She was free from her despised rival and only needed to wait for a message from her beloved Ricardo. Brenda felt delighted that she had executed the perfect crime. Crystal's honest confession and testimony against Brenda clearly proved Brenda's guilt, leading to a swift issuance of an arrest warrant. However, when police went to arrest her, Brenda was not at home. As a dual citizen, she escaped to Mexico. Following her escape, her role in arranging a contract killing was revealed, and she was added to the wanted list. On April 6, 2016, the FBI added Brenda to their list of most wanted fugitives, offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to her capture. She was the only woman on the list at that time and the 9th woman ever to be included. Just 2 days later, Mexican authorities arrested her in Torreon, Coahuila. She was extradited to the United States on October 6, under the condition that she would not face the death penalty. Once in the U.S., she was charged with capital murder in Texas, and her trial began in 2017. During the court hearing, the families of Kendra and Ricardo openly shared their feelings. Witnesses verified Brenda's harmful obsession with her ex-lover and her intentions. In court, Brenda's cousin Moses Martinez discussed his sister's depression following her breakup with Ricardo. He also disclosed that Brenda had offered him money to attack Kendra with a baseball bat, a proposal he declined. At the trial, Jennifer Escobar, Brenda's friend, testified that Brenda was obsessed with Ricardo. She recounted that Brenda would read all his emails and track his movements through his phone. Jennifer informed the jury that Brenda had a copy of his house key and access to his bank accounts. She also revealed that Brenda asked for her help to get rid of the hated Kendra, suggesting methods like injecting something lethal or using a bat to put her in a coma. Brenda offered Jennifer $2,000, a car, and illegal drugs in exchange for her help. Jennifer talked about this offer with her parents and decided to refuse it. It's odd that, when presented with the suggestion to harm or kill someone, but no one reported this threat to the police. Brenda's obsession was highlighted through evidence presented by several associates in court. It was found that Brenda had a motive to want Kendra dead, seeing H. or as a barrier to reuniting with Ricardo. Evidence revealed that Brenda's obsession grew significantly in the months before Kendra's death. During the hearing, an ATM withdrawal receipt for $500 was presented, which Brenda gave to Crystal as payment for her involvement. Christopher received a cash payment of $600. Cell phone records showed that Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher were together before the crime. Moreover, there were over 99 calls recorded between Brenda and Crystal from August 22 to September 4, demonstrating their constant communication to plan the murder of Kendra. The defendant's attorney attempted to place most of the blame on the actual perpetrators, but this strategy was unsuccessful. The defense claimed that Brenda was not present at the crime scene, offering an alibi and receipts showing she was at a restaurant when the crime occurred. Although Brenda did not plead guilty, the jury disagreed with her defense. Brenda was found guilty of murdering Kendra, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after just 30 minutes of deliberation. Christopher, who directly committed the murder, admitted his guilt and was sentenced to death. Crystal cooperated with the investigation and pleaded guilty, which resulted in her receiving a 35-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole. Kendra Hatcher's family expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and quietly left the courtroom after the verdict. On the other hand, the Delgado family never believed Brenda could be involved, as they knew her as a loving daughter and a woman with solid family values and Christian principles. In conclusion, the tragic case of Kendra Hatcher underscores the devastating consequences of unchecked jealousy and obsession. Brenda Delgado's relentless pursuit to reclaim her past love led to a senseless crime that ended a life full of promise. The investigation revealed the intricate and disturbing lengths to which Brenda went to orchestrate Kendra's murder, revealing a dark side that was hidden beneath a facade of normalcy. The verdict delivered justice for Kendra and her family, but it also serves as a stark reminder of the profound impact that personal vendettas can have when they spiral out of control. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sylvia Likens. Sylvia Likens was born on January 3, 1949, in Lebanon, Indiana, to carnival workers Lester and Betty Likens. She was the third of 5 children, and her childhood was marked by frequent moves and financial hardship. Sylvia's siblings included 2 sets of twins, older twins Daniel and Diana, and younger twins Benny and Jenny. Jenny suffered from polio, which left her with a limp and weak legs, requiring her to wear a steel brace for support. Due to her parents' unstable marriage and nomadic lifestyle, Sylvia and Jenny often stayed with their grandmother, providing a safer and more stable environment. This arrangement allowed the girls to maintain a steady education despite the family's frequent travels. Sylvia began taking on responsibilities at a young age. She babysat, ran errands for neighbors and friends, and helped with household chores such as ironing. This allowed her to earn some money to buy things she wanted, and she often shared the money with her mother. Those who knew Sylvia described her as a friendly, confident, and charming girl with long, wavy, light brown hair that fell to her shoulders. Her friends affectionately called her Cookie. However, despite her outgoing personality, Sylvia was self-conscious about her smile because she had lost a front tooth due to a childhood accident while playing with one of her brothers. Sylvia often took Jenny to the local skating rink, where she would help her skate by holding her hand. In June 1965, Sylvia and Jenny lived with their parents in Indianapolis. However, their mother was arrested and jailed for theft in July. Their father, Lester, then arranged for his young daughters to stay with Gertrude Benizzi, a mother of two daughters, Paula and Stephanie, whom the Sylvia sisters had met at Arsenal Technical High School. Gertrude agreed to care for the girls as her own until Lester returned. After July 4th, Sylvia and Jenny moved into Gertrude's home at 3850 East New York Street. Meanwhile, their father, brother, and later their mother traveled to the East Coast for the festival. Gertrude would receive $20 a week to care for the sisters until November. At first, things seemed normal at Gertrude's house. Sylvia got along well with Stephanie, and they enjoyed activities such as singing along to pop songs and helping around the house. The Sylvia sisters regularly attended Sunday school with the other Benizzi children, and Sylvia was praised by the pastor for her kindness and respect. Problems arose, however, when Sylvia's father, Lester, began to pay Gertrude late, often a day or two after the due date. These delays frustrated Gertrude, leading her to abuse the sisters. She began to spank their bare bottoms with various objects, such as a quarter-inch paddle, and cursed them. As the late payments became more frequent, the abuse and beatings escalated. On one occasion, Paula reported that Sylvia and her sisters had eaten too much at church dinner. As a result, both girls were spanked about 15 times on the back with the paddle. This occurred just a month after they moved in with Gertrude's family, in late August. Gertrude's behavior became increasingly abusive, with Sylvia as the primary target. It is possible that Gertrude's jealousy of Sylvia's youth and beauty contributed to her actions. Over time, the abuse became worse, with more frequent beatings. Sylvia was often starved. They were given only leftovers or spoiled food from the trash. On one occasion, she was falsely accused of stealing candy that she had actually bought. On another occasion, she was publicly humiliated when Sylvia told Stephanie and Jenny about a boyfriend she had in Long Beach, whom she had met while her family was living in California. She shared stories of her time with him, including one in which she snuggled under the covers with him. Gertrude asked Sylvia why she did that, and Sylvia shrugged and said she didn't know. A few days later, Gertrude brought up the subject again, this time making a sarcastic comment about Sylvia's growing belly and hinting that she might be pregnant. Sylvia thought Gertrude was joking and joked along. However, Gertrude continued to make things worse, repeatedly mentioning Sylvia's interactions with Son and hinting that she was pregnant. The situation turned violent when Gertrude suddenly kicked Sylvia in the genitals. Gertrude's overweight and pregnant daughter, Paula, who was jealous of Sylvia's appearance, joined in the attack. She pulled Sylvia out of the chair and onto the kitchen floor, screaming that Sylvia didn't deserve to sit in the chair. In another incident, while the family was having dinner, Gertrude, Paula, and a neighbor boy, Randy Gordon Lepper, forced Sylvia to eat a hot dog filled with mustard, ketchup, and relish. As expected, Sylvia vomited. and they brutally forced her to swallow what she had vomited. Sylvia was so upset that she spread rumors at school, accusing Stephanie and Paula of prostitution. When a boy at school approached Stephanie with offers, saying that Sylvia was the one who spread the rumors, Stephanie confronted Sylvia when she got home. Sylvia confessed to being the one who spread the rumors. Then, in retaliation, Stephanie punched her very hard. Sylvia apologized and cried. Stephanie's 15-year-old boyfriend, Randolph Hubbard, found out about the incident and the rumors, and then violently assaulted Sylvia. He slapped her, slammed her head against the wall, and threw her to the floor. Stephanie's mother, Gertrude, also joined in, hitting Sylvia several times with a paddle. Daily life at Gertrude's house was a nightmare of increasingly violent episodes. On one occasion, Paula punched Sylvia in the face so hard that she broke her own wrist, concentrating her blows on Sylvia's mouth and eyes. Paula then used a brace on her arm to beat Sylvia even harder. The abuse the Sylvia sisters suffered was not limited to physical violence. Gertrude also abused them verbally and psychologically. On one occasion, she falsely accused Sylvia of being a slut and a prostitute, criticizing the immorality of prostitution and the degradation of women. Gertrude then forced her younger sister Jenny to beat her, threatening that if she refused, she would suffer the same abuse as Sylvia. The Sylvia sisters were abused not only by Gertrude's family, but also by Coy Hubbard and his classmates, who frequently visited Gertrude's home. They would verbally and physically abuse Sylvia, and often with the participation of Gertrude and her children. Neighborhood children also frequently beat Sylvia, using her as a punching bag in violent judo training sessions. They would burn her body, burn her skin with sticks, and cause severe injuries to her genitals. In one particularly humiliating incident, Sylvia was forced to strip in the living room and masturbate with a bottle. Gertrude would later tell everyone that this humiliating act was to show Jenny what kind of person her sister was. Over time, Gertrude banned Sylvia from school after she confessed to stealing a gym outfit from school. Sylvia had taken the outfit because Gertrude had not bought her clothes. As a result, Sylvia's education was disrupted and she was severely punished. Gertrude regularly beat her with a 7-inch police belt. The situation escalated when Gertrude changed the subject to premarital sex and then kicked Sylvia in the genitals. During this attack, Stephanie defended Sylvia, shouting, "She didn't do anything." Gertrude continued to torture her by burning Sylvia's fingertips with matches before continuing to beat her. A few days later, Gertrude used a police belt to beat Jenny several times. Jenny is said to have taken a tennis shoe from school to put on her stronger foot. As the torture and abuse worsened, Sylvia was not allowed to use the bathroom and was forced to wet the bed as punishment for her incontinence. On October 6, 1965, Gertrude took Sylvia to the basement, tied her up, and barely fed or watered her. She was often tied to the basement stair railing with her feet barely touching the ground. Gertrude's family would occasionally stop abusing Sylvia to watch their favorite television show. Sylvia's tragic ordeal even involved the neighborhood children, who paid 5 cents each to participate in her humiliation, beating, burning, and eventually mutilation during her captivity in the basement. Gertrude and her children bound and gagged Sylvia, then placed her in a bathtub filled with hot water, and rubbed salt into her wounds. After this incident, the father of a neighbor boy named Michael John Monroe anonymously called the Arsenal School to report that a girl with sores all over her body was living at Gertrude's house. A school nurse came to Gertrude's house to investigate, as Sylvia had been absent from school for several days. However, Gertrude lied to the nurse, saying that Sylvia had run away the previous week and that she did not know where she was. Gertrude attributed Sylvia's sores to poor personal hygiene. Gertrude also claimed that Sylvia had been a negative influence on both her children and her sister. The school did not investigate further, neglecting to check on Sylvia's health or whereabouts. In mid-October, Gertrude's son, John Banaszewski Jr., played a cruel prank on Sylvia. He offered her a plate of soup, but quickly snatched it away when she tried to eat it with her hands. By this time, Sylvia was severely malnourished. Gertrude allowed Sylvia to sleep upstairs that night, but only if she did not wet the bed. Before going to bed, Sylvia secretly asked Jenny for a glass of water. The next morning, Gertrude discovered that Sylvia had accidentally wet the bed. To punish Sylvia, Gertrude forced her to masturbate again with a glass jar in front of Gertrude's children. Immediately afterwards, Gertrude yelled at Sylvia to go back to the kitchen. She then ordered Sylvia to strip. Gertrude told Sylvia, "You branded my daughter, now I will brand you." Using a hot needle, Gertrude began carving the words, "I am a prostitute and proud of it," into Sylvia's stomach. While Gertrude was still carving, she told 14-year-old Richard Hobbs to finish carving the words into Sylvia's skin. Meanwhile, Gertrude took Jenny to a nearby grocery store. Richard continued carving the words into Sylvia's stomach as she gritted her teeth and groaned in pain. Later, Richard and 10-year-old Shirley took Sylvia into the basement. They tried to burn the letter "Des" under Sylvia's left breast with an anchor bolt. The resulting deep burned scar looked like the number 3. That terrible night, Sylvia confided in her younger sister Jenny, saying that she was sure she would die from the unbearable abuse. The next day, Gertrude forced Sylvia to write a letter, the contents to fool her parents into thinking that Sylvia had run away from Gertrude's house. The letter was intended to falsely accuse a group of local boys of mistreating and harming Sylvia, claiming that she had initially consented to sexual intercourse with them. After the letter was written, Gertrude planned to have John Jr. and Jenny blindfold Sylvia, take her to a nearby wooded area called Jimmy Woods, and leave her for dead. However, this plan was not immediately carried out. Instead, Sylvia was tied to the railing of the basement stairs. Gertrude offered her biscuits, but Sylvia refused, offering to give them to the dog. Angered, Gertrude stuffed the biscuits into Sylvia's mouth, and she and her son John began to beat Sylvia savagely, aiming for her stomach. On October 26th, Sylvia's condition worsened. She had difficulty speaking and could no longer move her limbs properly. Gertrude took her into the kitchen, pressed her against the wall, and tried to feed her a donut and a glass of milk, but Sylvia was unable to hold the glass of milk properly. Gertrude became frustrated and assaulted Sylvia. After being thrown to the floor and returned to the basement, Sylvia became delirious, moaning and mumbling continuously. When Paula asked her to recite the alphabet, Sylvia could not read past the first 4 letters, indicating that her cognitive abilities were severely impaired. She was also unable to get up from the floor. That afternoon, a group of neighborhood tormentors gathered in the basement, and Sylvia attempted to identify them, waving her arms and shouting names. However, her efforts were hampered by her increasingly deteriorating physical and mental condition. After being repeatedly abused, Sylvia attempted to escape from the basement but collapsed from exhaustion before reaching the stairs. As a result, she faced severe punishment. Gertrude hit Sylvia hard on the head, knocking her unconscious, then stood there watching her for a while. At 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs arrived at Gertrude's house and went straight to the basement. There, he found Stephanie crying, holding Sylvia's weak and badly injured body. Sure, Mother Gertrude instructed Stephanie to clean Sylvia, but Stephanie and Richard decided instead to bathe Sylvia with warm soapy water and dress her in clean clothes. After bathing, they placed Sylvia on a mattress in one of the bedrooms. In her final moments, Sylvia expressed her final wishes, to be with her father or at least taken home. After enduring severe punishment and weakened by lack of food, she eventually died from her injuries. When Stephanie discovered that Sylvia was no longer breathing, she attempted to revive her with artificial respiration. Meanwhile, Gertrude claimed that Sylvia had been faking her death. Initially, Gertrude beat Sylvia's body with a book. When Sylvia was found dead, Gertrude panicked and ordered Richard Hobbs to call the police from a nearby pay phone. When the police arrived at the address around 6:30 p.m., Gertrude led them to the bedroom, where they found Sylvia's badly beaten and mutilated body on a dirty mattress. Gertrude gave the police a letter that Sylvia had been forced to write. Gertrude claimed that she had cared for Sylvia for more than an hour before her death and had applied antiseptic to her wounds in an attempt to provide first aid. She told the police that Sylvia had run away with some teenagers earlier, but had returned that afternoon, topless and holding the note. Holding a Bible, Paula told everyone in the house that Sylvia's death was preordained. She then turned to Jenny and calmly said, "If you want to stay with us, we will treat you like one of our sisters." However, Jenny was urged to say something to the police before they arrived. Jenny recounted the events leading up to Sylvia's death at the request of Gertrude's family. Jenny then whispered to the police to take them away, and she told them everything. Jenny Lycan's official statement led to the arrest of Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Jr. Banaszewski on suspicion of Sylvia's murder, just hours after her body was discovered. Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs were also arrested and charged with the same crime on the same day. Gertrude and Coy Hubbard's 3 older children were taken to a nearby juvenile detention center, while Gertrude and Richard Hobbs' younger children were detained at the Indianapolis Children's Home. All were held without bail until trial. Initially, Gertrude denied any involvement in Sylvia Lycan's death. However, within a day of her arrest, she admitted to knowing the children and admitted that her daughter, Paula, and Coy Hubbard had physically and mentally abused Sylvia. Gertrude also admitted to forcing Sylvia to sleep in the basement 3 times after she wet the bed. When asked about possible causes of Sylvia's incontinence, including emotional distress and kidney injury, Gertrude was evasive. Paula showed no remorse and signed a statement admitting to repeatedly hitting Sylvia. She also admitted to other acts of cruelty, such as pushing Sylvia down the basement stairs multiple times. John Jr. admitted to hitting Sylvia and frequently abusing her with his fists. He also confessed to burning Sylvia with matches on multiple occasions and said that his mother had burned Sylvia with cigarettes on multiple occasions. Sylvia Lycan's autopsy revealed severe and widespread injuries, with over 150 separate wounds throughout her body. She was severely malnourished at the time of her death. The injuries varied in location, type, severity, and stage of healing, and included burns, severe bruising, and significant damage to muscles and nerves. In addition, her vaginal cavity was swollen and nearly closed, and the autopsy found that her hymen was intact, refuting Gertrude's claim that Sylvia was 3 months pregnant and the allegations of prostitution and promiscuity. Sylvia Lycan's official cause of death was severe head trauma resulting in bleeding into the brain. The cause was a blow to the right side of her head. The doctor also noted that Sylvia's body had suffered severe damage from prolonged abuse of her skin and underlying tissues, as well as prolonged malnutrition. Sylvia's body was found and it was estimated that she had likely died within 8 hours of her discovery. An autopsy revealed that Sylvia had been recently bathed, possibly after her death, which could have affected the rate of loss of body temperature and the onset of rigor mortis. Gertrude Banaszewski, her children Paula and John, and 2 young neighbors, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, were tried and convicted in May 1966 for the neglect, torture, and murder of Sylvia. After 8 hours of deliberations, the jury found Gertrude guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to life in prison. She was paroled in 1985. Paula was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. She later appealed and was retried in 1971, where she pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 2 to 21 years in prison. She was released from prison in 1972. Hobbs, Hubbard, and John were convicted of manslaughter and spent less than 2 years in the Indiana House of Reform before being paroled on February 27, 1968. Indiana residents consider the torture and murder of Sylvia Likens to be the worst crime in the state's history. Sylvia died on October 26 in Indianapolis, Indiana, before her parents could return to pick her and her sister up in November. The sisters did not want to report the increasing abuse and neglect to family members or school, fearing that speaking out would only make things worse. Jenny, the younger sister, was threatened by Gertrude that she would be abused and tortured like her sister if she spoke up. Jenny was also bullied by neighborhood girls, who would taunt or attack her whenever she mentioned her sister's plight. Neighbors, including a middle-aged couple who lived nearby, saw signs that the girls were being abused, but no one dared to report it to the police. All those involved in Sylvia's torture and murder were sentenced to prison. Although some perpetrators do not serve full prison sentences, they will forever be haunted by the consequences and horror of their actions. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970. He, along with his older brother, grew up in Indiana, United States. Born into a middle-class family, John was an ambitious young man with a strong desire for independence and self-improvement. Right after graduating from high school, he began looking for ways to make money. His brother recalls that John's first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant, but he left the position quickly for unknown reasons, and he feeling frustrated at work. However, this setback did not dampen his ambitions. Soon after, he found a new job that offered him greater independence and helped him realize his true passion, sales. John's career took off when he became a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. At first, his family doubted his decision, but he quickly proved them wrong. By the end of his first year, John had become the top salesperson in the area. He worked diligently, often putting in 12 to 16 hours a day, which earned him recognition at company meetings and the respect of his peers. John's success inspired other salespeople, who came to him for guidance, new ideas, and motivation, and he happily took on a leadership role. During this period, John met Judy, a 20 years old from Texas. She comes from a low-income family. Born in October 1969, Judy was confident and outgoing. Although John wasn't looking to hire new salespeople at the time, Judy's enthusiasm and assertiveness convinced him to give her a chance. Despite being young, but Judy had already experienced significant life events. At 14, with her parents' permission, she had gotten married and later divorced, resulting in 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks. John decided to mentor Judy in vacuum cleaner sales. Judy to be a quick learner, and she not only earning a spot on John's sales team but also winning his affection. The two eventually started dating each other. John's life was thriving. He was renowned for his exceptional sales skills and training abilities, and Judy's support in both his personal and professional life. This foundation gave John the confidence to launch his own business in Michigan, specializing in selling and servicing Kirby vacuum cleaners. As part of his venture, John offered training sessions to salespeople, sharing effective strategies he developed and the passion that drove his success. His company rose to become one of the area's top performers, and John consistently credited his success to Judy's unwavering support. In 1992, John and Judy got married, having established stability in their professional lives. In the following years, they dedicate themselves to demonstrating what a good salesperson can achieve in life. The couple had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica, in addition to Judy's 2 children from a previous relationship, Christina and Daniel. After that, their family moved residences several times, always to nicer houses, giving their children access to better schools, luxury cars, and regular vacations. Initially, John had no issues with his stepchildren. While Daniel was energetic and sometimes mischievous, Christina was a sweet and well-behaved child. John and Judy enjoyed a comfortable life, and John used his wealth as motivation for young salespeople he trained, proving that hard work and determination can bring about a prosperous life. As Christina and Daniel entered teenage years, problems arose. Christina began associating with people who exhibited poor behavior and allegedly engaged in underage drinking and even drug use. At the same time, Daniel, who was 13, was dealing with anger issues and hanging out with a questionable group of friends. One incident occurred when Daniel took his father John's car and drove recklessly through the neighborhood with his friends, knocking down and damaging several mailbox posts. To avoid trouble with the police, John took responsibility for the damage and personally paid the affected homeowners the next day. Around this time, John received a complaint from his stepson's school regarding the boy's misconduct. Unfortunately, the situation escalated, and John physically struck the young man, causing further strain on their relationship. 9 years after the family began living together, Judy decided to take them on a trip to Texas, where she grew up. During this visit, Judy expressed her concerns to her brother about her troubled marriage and the mistreatment of Christina and Daniel by John. However, Judy blamed John for her children's problems, and she made excuses for their misbehavior, which made their family problems worse. John's life became even more complicated when he began to suspect his wife of having an affair, specifically with one of his employees. To uncover the truth, John took matters into his own hands. He installed cameras in several parts of the office and eventually obtained clear evidence of his wife's infidelity. This discovery was a real shock to John, completely changing his previously happy and friendly personality. John's behavior deteriorated as he began drinking excessively, leading to intense arguments with Judy and violent outbursts towards his children. When Tiffany's teacher informed John that she hadn't brought her homework, he punished her with a belt, leaving visible marks. The teacher reported the incident to social services the next day, after seeing the injuries. Before social services arrived, John intimidated the children by implying that if they wanted to maintain their comfortable life, they should remain silent about the beating. As a result, Tiffany falsely accused Daniel of being responsible, and he didn't deny it. John's bad mood affected not only his family, but also his employees and the company's clients, who suffered through his fits of anger as a result of his wife's infidelity. In an attempt to create distance between his wife and the person she was involved with, John moved his family to a more affluent area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite still loving his wife and hoping that a change of environment would give them a fresh start, the situation did not improve. While Judy lost weight and changed her style to improve her appearance, John did the opposite. He let himself go, grew a beard, started smoking, and only wore jeans. His preoccupation with his personal problems left him constantly distracted. As a result, the business began to suffer, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. John was forced to sell his boat to stay financially afloat. Rumors spread throughout the office that Judy was having an affair with Jeff, John's closest business associate. Although the validity of these rumors was uncertain, but they put more strain on John and Judy's already troubled marriage. John's world was turned upside down when Judy told him she wanted a divorce. However, John made it clear that if she left him, she would be left with nothing. He felt he had given her everything, including lifting her out of poverty, accepting her children, providing her with luxuries, and loving her. However, he became exasperated when she decides to leave, threatening that if she leaves him, she will leave with empty hands. John possessed a crucial piece of evidence, a recording of Judy having an affair with Jeff. As a result, their relationship became more strained in early 2003, which also affected their children's behavior. On Thursday, April 17, 2013, John and Judy attempted to resolve their issues over dinner at a restaurant. After finishing dinner, they called home to check on the children and said they would be back soon. However, their plans changed when Christina asked them to stop by the office because she had left a school notebook there. Leaving the restaurant, they went to the company and John brought the rest of the dinner to Jeff, who was working late. When they arrived at the office in an isolated industrial area around 10 p.m., John went inside to talk to Jeff while Judy quickly retrieved the notebook and returned to their car. Minutes after, John left the office. He opened the rear door on the driver's side of his vehicle to retrieve something. Suddenly, 2 loud gunshots rang out, and John fell to the ground in the parking lot. Judy and Jeff immediately called 911 to report the incident. Police and medical units arrived at the scene quickly. Sadly, 33-year-old John Parker was found to have been shot in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. During the investigation, Judy, who was inside the vehicle when the shots were fired, was questioned by the authorities. She told them she was sitting in the car when her husband, John, came out of the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side. Her account was limited, as she did not see what happened next, only hearing the 2 loud gunshots after John opened the door. Judy remembered that when she heard the shots, she immediately hid behind the seat. When she cautiously lifted her head, she caught a brief glimpse of a man wearing dark clothing fleeing the scene. They also noticed that John's wallet was missing, leading them to initially believe it was a robbery. As investigators took a closer look, they started to question the details surrounding John's death. Since no one knew about Judy and John's plans, several inconsistencies stood out. What could be the motive for targeting an empty industrial area at night when there would be no one around? If the goal was robbery, it doesn't make sense that the perpetrator would kill John before taking his belongings, especially when he was wearing a $20,000 gold Rolex and other easily accessible valuables. Moreover, why didn't the thief search John's pockets? This is a common action in robberies. The investigation into John's death raised more questions than it answered. 2 bullet casings found at the scene matched Judy's claim of hearing 2 shots. It was clear that one of the shots had killed John instantly, but there was no official information about the second shot. The investigators started by taking a statement from Judy, the key witness to the incident. Judy reported that her husband had previously gotten into an argument with one of his employees. She was able to identify the employee involved in the argument, but beyond this, she had no additional information to provide beyond what she had already shared at the scene. The investigators also spoke with Jeff, who was inside the office at the time of the shooting. However, he was unable to provide any useful information, as he did not exit the office until after the shots had been fired and the incident was over. The authorities informed Christina that her stepfather had passed away. After nearly ruling out a robbery motive, detectives shifted their investigation to focus on the people close to John, starting with an employee who had previously expressed resentment towards him. The employee confirmed that they had a significant disagreement, but claimed that it had been peacefully resolved. He also provided an alibi, which was thoroughly investigated and verified. The investigation was expanded to cover almost all individuals associated with John, including those he did business with. Past and present employees, competitors in his industry, and his personal friends and social connections. The investigation into John's murder revealed a new lead involving Judy. Unlike what is typically expected of a grieving person, her behavior during her husband's funeral was unusual, as she seemed cheerful and was chatting with friends. Another notable observation was that her ex-husband seemed completely unbothered by the incident, calmly reading a newspaper just 4 days after John's murder. Daniel, 15, was brought in for questioning on suspicion of being involved in the murder. The police suspected him because of an incident 6 months earlier. At that time, gang members told the police that Daniel had paid them to kill his stepfather, John. However, the gang members claimed they never planned to carry out the murder and just kept the money. The police didn't find their story believable and took the money, but they didn't seem to do anything more about it at the time. Later, After John was killed, the police decided to re-examine whether Daniel might be involved in the crime. During questioning, Daniel admitted to paying people to hurt John, but not intending to kill him, but rather injure him, specifically by breaking his legs. Authorities did detain one of the individuals Daniel to have hired, but this person was released after a thorough investigation verified their alibi. Daniel was eventually released after 9 days, due to insufficient evidence and because he was a minor. As the case unfolded, it became clear that John had prior conflicts with the children of Judy, Christina, and Daniel. This led to further scrutiny of Daniel and raised suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. Christina denied any involvement when questioned by investigators. Both Christina and Daniel expressed a desire to eliminate John, leading investigators to wonder where the money for these schemes came from, and they suspected that Judy might be the one giving them the money to carry out these plans. When investigators looked more closely, they discovered that before John's death, he and Judy's relationship had deteriorated so many, partly due to Judy's infidelity. Despite this, it appeared John had no intention of leaving Judy and was instead working on saving their troubled marriage. Judy's main reason for targeting her husband appeared to be financial gain. Detectives found that John had 2 life insurance policies worth $1 million. Following John's death, Judy tried to collect the insurance money, but the insurance company initially denied her claim due to the ongoing investigation into his death. The payment was also postponed because John's father suspected Judy was involved in his son's death and was investigating further. The case eventually stalled due to lack of concrete evidence, but a lot has changed in John's family. Judy was rarely at home, she devoting her time to her new partner, Jeff, who was also John's manager. As a result, Christina and Daniel took on more responsibilities, caring for their younger sisters, Tiffany and Erica. After several months, Judy and Jeff decided to relocate out of state with John's younger daughters, Tiffany and Erica. Around this time, Daniel went to live with his biological father, while Christina remained in the house, now pregnant and in a relationship with her boyfriend. The investigation was stalled, but the authorities didn't give up. They kept the case open and repeatedly reviewed the files, hoping to find a clue new. This persistence eventually paid off. The detectives received a new lead, which led them to question some of the classmates of Christina and Daniel. The classmates confessed to selling a gun to Christina and Daniel, which sparked an investigation into a family John-owned piece of land that Christina used for target practice. When investigators searched the area, they found multiple spent bullet casings. Laboratory analysis of these casings revealed a crucial piece of evidence. The casings matched those found at John's 2007 crime scene. New information came to light when a narcotics officer revealed that Christina's ex-boyfriend had been involved in a drug-related case. With the hope of receiving a lighter sentence, Christina's ex-boyfriend revealed a conversation he had with Judy. In the conversation, Judy mentioned that her son Daniel was the one who fired the fatal shot. When confronted with this new evidence, Christina began to cooperate. As the owner of the gun used in the crime, the 21-year-old Christina admitted to buying the weapon. She also admitted that on the night of the incident, she had asked her parents to visit the office, claiming she had left her homework behind there. Christina admitted to being involved in plot to kill John and stated that her younger brother Daniel was designated as the person who would open fire. When Daniel was found and arrested in Arizona, he was confronted with the new evidence and Christina's confession. Daniel confessed to shooting John, but claimed that their mother, Judy, was the one who had come up with the plan. According to Daniel, Judy had stolen $7,500 by forging company checks and had used this money to try to hire someone to kill John, but ultimately decided to have Daniel do it instead. Judy's original plan failed when the individuals she hired took the payment but did not complete the task. At that point, Judy instructed them to buy a gun for her son to use instead. Furthermore, Daniel revealed that it was Judy who created the excuse for her and John to leave the house that night. When Christina called to pick up her homework that she had left at company, he shot John in the head. The second shot occurred accidentally as Daniel rummaged through John's pockets, searching for his wallet as his mother had instructed. Following the shooting, Daniel returned home without alerting his younger sisters. His sister Christina helped by distracting Tiffany and Erica with television, allowing Daniel to enter the house unnoticed. Christina and Daniel claimed that their mother manipulated them into committing the crime by telling them they had been abused by John and promising that by doing so, they would gain a better life with more freedom and financial stability. However, this was not Judy's first attempt to harm her husband, as she had previously tried to poison his food, which led to he being briefly hospitalized. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. However, Christina entered a not guilty plea for the conspiracy charge and was released on bail a few months later. In 2008, when Daniel was 20 years old, he pleaded guilty to conspiring to kill his stepfather, John. As part of a deal, Daniel agreed to cooperate and testify against his mother in exchange for a lighter sentence. Instead of being charged with murder, he would face a sentence of 20 to 25 years in prison for conspiracy. According to Daniel, the plan to kill John began nearly a year before the incident, when he was just 14 years old. Judy and Christina initially brought the idea to him. He claimed, and Judy supplied him with a gun and other necessary items for the crime. These items included money to buy black clothing, gloves, and a mask. His mother also instructed him on how to commit the crime without leaving any evidence behind, including taking a thorough shower to eliminate gunpowder residue after returning home. Then Judy took charge of getting rid of the evidence, including the gun, clothes, and her husband's wallet. 6 years later, in July 2009, Judy knew she couldn't escape the law anymore and turned herself in. She agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, admitting she had planned, carried out, and tried to cover up the crime. The prosecutors wanted Judy to spend the rest of her life in prison, with a minimum sentence of 28 years and a maximum sentence of 35 years. Judy, who was nearly 40 years old at the time, was given a 33-year prison sentence in August 2009. The next month, her co-conspirator Daniel received a 23-year sentence. Christina was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Press reports said Daniel was released in 2017 after participating in a community transition court program and that he subsequently chose to live a low-profile life. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but sadly died from a drug overdose shortly after. This case is a tragic example of how greed can lead people to commit terrible crimes. Judy's actions had devastating consequences for her family. Despite overcoming early struggles and achieving success, her desire for more led her to destroy the life of a successful businessman, John Parker. Her actions also deeply affected her 4 children, leaving 2 in prison and taking away their father. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Laura Lopez. Laura Lopez was born on November 11, 2000, in Plata, Argentina. Her older sisters, Melissa and Damaris, who were 18 at the time of her birth, love her very much. Tragically, their mother passed away when Laura was just 3 years old, and her 3 sisters were taken care of by their father. Although he initially tried to support the family, he later fell into alcoholism a few years after. Despite the challenges she faced, Laura was known for her sweet and loving personality. Her sister affectionately called her Cello, a nickname that everyone who knew her called. Years later, when their father lost his job, the family needed to find additional work. At 18, Laura started selling fried pastries during the day while attending high school in the evening. In her free time, she focused on caring for her nieces and nephews. At the beginning of her studies, she hoped to secure a good job to improve her family's financial situation and bring them stability. Unfortunately, and unexpected incident occurred that hindered her plans. On September 12, 2019, Laura and Demaurice spent the entire day enjoying tea together. Demaurice had just completed renovations on her house, and Laura playfully remarked that Demaurice had never made tea quite like that before. Regardless, it was a lovely day. Later, Laura went to school, where her classmates noticed something unusual about her behavior. She decided to sit at the back of the class instead of her usual seat and left shortly after 20 minutes, when the lesson ended. When Laura returned home around 11:30 p.m., a friend greeted her. They chatted, had a few drinks, and took selfies for social media. They said their goodbyes at 3 a.m. Laura expressed that she was feeling tired and to get some sleep. The next day, Melissa sent a message to Laura asking if she had seen a doctor for her ear problems. When Laura didn't respond, Melissa started to feel anxious. Worried about Laura's whereabouts, Melissa reached out to Demaurice for information, which only heightened her concern. After hours of searching, Melissa and Demaurice went to the police station for help. However, they were told they would have to wait 48 hours since Laura was last seen before they could file a missing person report. The officers thought Laura might have had a boyfriend, since it is common for teenagers to encounter situations like this. On Saturday the 14th, the police received a report, and they initiated a search, but unfortunately, it was too late. On Sunday the 15th, two fishermen working in the El River's breakwater area, just 15 kilometers from Laura's home, noticed something unusual. They remained calm until they discovered a young girl's body floating in the water, with limbs and a skull. They quickly contacted the authorities to report their find. When the officers arrived, they saw that the attack had been extremely violent and it was clear that the attacker was skilled with knives. The detectives were actively looking for clues in the crime scene. They found a fabric bag, leggings, and underwear in the river, but they were completely destroyed. During their investigation, they also discovered 2 rings and, after searching the riverbed, found a knife stained with blood. The officers contacted Laura's family, and when Demaurice arrived at the location, she quickly identified the clothing as Laura's belongings. Fishermen had found Laura's limbs and skull in shallow waters downstream from the initial discovery, which was then handed over to the forensic team for examination. Dr. Carlos Gordillo conducted the autopsy and determined that the death was caused by a severe blow to the head, which led to internal bleeding and increased pressure in the brain. A blow to the back of the head left her unconscious. Laura suffered between 2 and 4 hours of intense pain. Additionally, bruises were found on her arms, indicating that she had been beaten and had fought against her attacker. And the presence of intimate injuries on her body was a clear indication of sexual assault. Dr. Carlos Gordillo also mentioned that there were cuts on her neck, arms, and legs, suggesting that the attacker might have used kitchen knives. After 3 a.m. on Friday, they analyzed Laura's cell phone. Her last contact was with a 28-year-old mechanic named Alfredo Emilio Escobar. He and Laura had been high school classmates, and he enjoyed hunting and fishing, which meant he was skilled with a knife. His house was 2.5 kilometers, 20 blocks, from Laura's home, making it easy for him to visit. The cell tower signals were strong, and on September 13th, Alfredo contacted Laura 4 times. At that time, the cell towers showed they were both at home. Soon after, both phones were active near Laura's house. Laura's phone traveled to the city center and arrived at Alfredo's residence by 5 a.m. Laura's WhatsApp story featured an alien emoji, and her phone was still being tracked. Alfredo was found at his home at 5:52 a.m. After this time, Laura's phone stopped working, and there was no further communication from her. Records show that Alfredo didn't use his cell phone again until 11:05 p.m. the following day. Alfredo returned home at 12:05 p.m. on September 15th, caught by 13 cameras, including city and private surveillance. Investigations on local stores revealed recordings from the early morning of September 13th, showing their physical characteristics resemble Laura and Alfredo. Laura's then mobile phone was moving, and Alfredo was undoubtedly the only suspect in this case. During the investigation, one of the agents recognized Alfredo, recalling a meeting with him a year ago on Highway 22 while traveling to meet family in the towns of Nguyen and Plotier. At that time, a young man had crashed into a patrol car while driving over 80 kilometers per hour. He refused arrest, leading to a lawsuit. Alfredo was about to go to court for that incident, but now he faces more serious charges. At 8:30 a.m. on September 17th, a police patrol was stationed about 30 meters from Alfredo's residence. While on duty, they noticed a young man resembling he driving away from a Fiat Ducato minibus they had been watching. The police identified him by his face shape, facial features, and hairstyle. He entered a house and later left with two adults approximately 60 years old. The three of them got into a vehicle and headed towards Highway 22 without drawing attention. The police pursued the vehicle until it stopped in a remote area, around 30 meters from a bridge connecting Nguyen and Saletti. The elderly man and Alfredo got out of the vehicle at the same time, and the police asked for their identification. He was with his father and another man, while his mother stayed in the car. It was clear they were trying to leave the city. Alfredo agreed to the identification process but appeared nervous. Soon after, he was taken to the police station and his car was impounded. He underwent a medical examination, which revealed swollen areas on his right knuckles, indicating he had used them to punch. He also had cuts and bruises on the palm of his right hand. Laura's death happened the same day these were found. As a result, Alfredo was charged with raping and murdering Laura. Despite a request to remain silent, he was detained for 6 months over concerns he might escape or obstruct the investigation. On September 1st, a search warrant was executed at the Estrada Street residence where the Alfredo family lived. The property was large, with a construction site and 2 buildings at the back. In Alfredo's sleeping area, officers found fingerprints on the walls. Using luminol to test them revealed blood stains. A blood-stained cloth was also found during the search. The situation escalated when officers went to the building behind the residence and found blood spots on the crumpled vegetation. Blood was also detected on the gates, the right handle of a cart, and at one end of an infrared emitting device. This location was where the fatal blow that killed Laura occurred. The search team collected blood samples for comparison and found that both Laura's and Alfredo's blood were present. The fluid found on Laura's body was examined through DNA analysis. Alfredo's lawyer said the rape charges should not have been brought before the test results were available. However, the results were released shortly. The Ministry of Health Central Laboratory analyzed the samples collected during the investigation. The genetic profiles of both Laura and Alfredo were compared. At the time of his arrest, Alfredo was wearing sneakers, and a knife was found at the bottom of the river. Both were tested. DNA matching Laura's was found on both items. Her genital area was examined using 3 swabs, and Alfredo's DNA matched one of them. This evidence allowed investigators to confirm that he had sexually assaulted Laura. She was killed, dismembered, and her body was disposed of. Law enforcement officials confirmed this during a press conference on September 21st. The prosecutor Juan Austin Garcia believed Alfredo Emilio Escobar was guilty of the crime. He accused Alfredo of killing Laura to cover up the rape and said that if found guilty, Alfredo could be prosecuted and face life in prison. Despite this, more evidence was still needed. DNA analysis technology played an important role in discovering that Alfredo was the suspect. Although he did not plead guilty, The court ordered the seizure of his mobile phone and required him to provide the access code. Despite having Laura as one of his contacts, it was discovered that he had deleted her from the conversation the night she disappeared. He erased Laura's call history, but their social security numbers are still not deleted. Media interviews revealed Alfredo's actions on September 11th, 12th, and 13th. During the investigation, he visited social media platforms to look at photos shared by Laura. Although Alfredo claimed to be innocent, the evidence suggested he was responsible for the murder. Finally, conclusions have been drawn about the incident that took place on the night of the crime. On September 12, 2019, Laura left school around 8 p.m. After spending time with a friend, she mentioned feeling tired and intended to go to sleep. Despite this, Alfredo contacted her at 3:40 a.m. and they began a conversation. Although they were not friends, she agreed to meet him, and then she went to his house. The incident inside the house are unclear, but research shows that Laura avoided any personal contact with Alfredo. In a fit of anger, he sexually assaulted her. Because he was afraid she would denounce him to the authorities, he murdered her. Alfredo led Laura to the backyard, hitting her on the head twice. At that point, she was still alive, but he cruelly hid her body for several hours to avoid getting caught. He also turned off his phone. Laura's body remained in the shed for almost a day, and she died from her injuries. Alfredo used a sharp knife from his kitchen to dismember her body. He then packed the body her parts into his Fiat Ducato minibus and drove 15 kilometers to the area near the breakwaters and left her body there. Afterward, he returned and turned on his phone. Feel relieved that everything has been settled. This case attracted the attention of the whole city. Alfredo's 23-year-old sister made the most headlines when she posted a message on her personal page mentioning both her brother and the victim, Laura. The post received mixed reactions. Some people sympathized with her, while others accused her of being complicit. The younger sister Alfredo's asked Cello and her team to remain vigilant, as her family is involved. Melissa later contacted Alfredo's sister to thank her for the message and asked for clarification. The criminal case was immediately initiated by the prosecution. The initial court hearings were held at the Provincial Legislative Assembly. According to the prosecutor of Nukan, Alfredo was entirely responsible for his actions, and Laura's death was attributed to gender-based violence, in addition to other charges such as rape. In the same hearing, the experts who were involved in analyzing the clothing found in the case, the river, along with the remains and evidence discovered at Alfredo's house, provided their testimony. Florencia, Laura's closest friend, was an unexpected witness. She explained that Alfredo had been messaging Laura for months, inviting her to meet for drinks and socializing. However, they had never met before. Florencia had known Alfredo for 5 years and was aware of his bad reputation. His house frequently hosted parties filled with alcohol and drugs, and intimate acts shared publicly by couples. Florencia had repeatedly advised Laura not to get involved with he, but she consistently ignored. The defense asked why Florencia had not suggested Laura blocking Alfredo's number. Florencia responded that Laura had made that decision and she did not want to interfere in Laura's life. While Florencia was on the stand, a video from security cameras from the day Laura disappeared was shown. In the footage from around 4 a.m., 2 people can be seen on opposite sides of the screen, heading towards the city center. Florencia admits that it was Laura, stating that her sneakers, jacket, and manner of walking were unmistakable. She also recognized Alfredo. The testimony of Alfredo's friend revealed his impulsiveness when the judge accused him of infidelity. His behavior was characterized by substance abuse and womanizing tendencies. Alfredo's ex-partner, also present in court, stated that their relationship ended badly years ago. She reported him to the authorities because she believed he had stolen from her house and taken money. When she met him to ask for the money back, he chased after the friend who accompanied her. After reviewing the testimonies, Alfredo tried to defend himself. He claimed that his friend, who sold him illegal drugs, was the real culprit. He said that he had been unconscious during the incident that night. He told the local media that he did not commit murder. He explained that he was intoxicated that night, and his friend was also under the influence of drugs at his residence with Laura. When he heard a scream from one of the rooms, Alfredo went to check it out. Seeing blood, he cleaned it up and helped his friend hide the body. In the end, the truth is what truly matters. Despite the lack of evidence, the statement was not confirmed. Alfredo was the only suspect. In his speech, the prosecutor stated that Alfredo took advantage of betraying Laura's trust due to his familiarity with her. He was responsible for the cruelty of his actions and the gruesome method of disposing of the remains. Alfredo Emilio Alfredo was convicted of the rape and murder of 18-year-old Laura Lopez after a jury deliberated for just 40 minutes. This charge is made more serious because it involved an attempt to conceal the attack. The issue of gender violence played a role in the case, leading to him receiving a life sentence without the possibility of release. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Su Xinqi. On July 4, 2009, several lecturers from the finance department of a Chinese university gathered to work overtime to manage and monitor the school's finances and expenses from the previous semester. One lecturer, Tam Xingfai, 43, was scheduled to attend but was missing. At 11 a.m., a colleague named Ma tried to call Xingfai's cell phone but received no response. Despite the heavy workload, Ma was not too worried at first. He thought Xingfai might be taking care of his family's dog, which had a skin disease. Xingfai had planned to take the dog to the vet, so Ma assumed that was where he was. On July 5th, the university's finance department held a meeting, but Xingfai failed to attend for the second time. Ma tried calling his cell phone again, but no one answered. Unfortunately, Ma did not have Xingfai's home phone number, so he could not contact him that way. By July 6th, Xingfai had been absent from work for 2 days and had not contacted any of his colleagues. Eventually, one of his colleagues reported the situation to the finance department. Xingfai's supervisors had his home landline number, so they called there, but like his cell phone, no one answered. They called the library where his 33-year-old wife, Han Tong Yen, worked. Library staff confirmed that she had also been absent from work without permission. The couple lived in Zhongshan, Guangdong Province, China, and had been married for 11 years. They have 2 daughters, the eldest, Tam Hu-man, 10, and the youngest, Tam Hu-wing, 7. Despite their financial difficulties and living in an abandoned recycling station on Waju South Road, they are known to be kind, cheerful, and positive people with well-behaved children. Xingfai often takes his daughters into town to have fun, leading some to believe that the family went on vacation together. However, something unexpected happened that prevented them from returning home. His colleagues spent quite a while trying to contact him by calling both his cell phone and his home phone, hoping to reach him. Finally, someone answered, but instead of a family member, it was a middle-aged man who was a stranger. The man claimed to be Xingfai's cousin and said that the family had gone to Dongguan, Guangdong Province, China for the summer vacation. He said that Xingfai had entrusted his phone to him for safekeeping. When asked when the family would return to Hong Kong, the man could not answer. After repeated inquiries, he hung up and turned off the phone. This call only added to the suspicion and anxiety of his colleagues towards Xingfai. Xingfai was always hardworking and responsible, never missing work without a good reason. If he planned to go on vacation with his children, he would make sure their schools were notified in advance. In addition, his family kept 9 stray dogs, raising concerns about who would take care of them if they traveled to the mainland and how they would be able to afford the trip to China. Previously, Xing Fai lived with his parents. His father was a sailor and his mother worked at a paper mill. Unfortunately, his father went missing and was never found, which caused his mother to become ill and eventually end up in a nursing home. Xing Fai's abandonment of her was considered completely out of character for him, especially since he visited her every week. They eventually decided to contact the police. One of Xing Fai's co-workers led the police to Xing Fai's house, which was located at an abandoned recycling station in Pingqi village. During their journey, they saw a short man through the fence of Xing Fai's property. He quickly disappeared from sight, but they didn't think much of it and continued on. When they reached the gate of the house, they found that the door was locked. The police then inspected the property and interviewed the neighbors. The abandoned recycling station covers an area of nearly 450 square meters, of which only 90 square meters are built, leaving nearly 350 square meters as empty flower beds. The construction of the building was not permitted. The previous owner had built several corrugated iron sheds on the site for waste recycling. A stone house next door was used as a pig farm, and there were few residents in the area. As a result, the police were only able to question one neighbor, an elderly woman surnamed Wang, who lived alone across the street. She said she had lived in the area for a long time and was familiar with the family's routine, noting that they often spent their afternoons working in the garden. However, she had little information about their personal lives and commented that the family rarely had visitors due to the isolated nature of the site. The only relative who visited and contacted Xing Fai was Xing Fai's middle-aged cousin, Zhu Wang. Zhu Wang did not have much information about Xing Fai's family. He only knew that Xing Fai's cousin lived in a nearby stone house. Xing Fai's colleague informed the police that his call was answered by Zhu Wang, leading them to believe that he was the one on the other end of the line. However, Zhu Wang said that he did not know the address of Xing Fai or his cousin. Prior to these events, the police went to Xing Fai's house to investigate in Pingqi village. That same day, the police found a man at a stone house on Waju Road number 74. The man, Su Xingqi, 42, confirmed that he was Xing Fai's cousin. He said that he often went to Xing Fai's house to help with renovations and gardening. When asked about the phone call, he said that the family was in China for a vacation. On July 5, Xing Fai visited his mother at the nursing home. He then went home to tell Su about his plans to travel to Dongguan, China for a few days. Su explained that using Xing Fai's Hong Kong mobile phone in mainland China would incur high roaming charges, so he asked Su to keep the phone until he returned. The witness and Xing Fai's colleague who saw him running away was actually Zhu Wang, who had just finished feeding the family dog. Su appeared calm and there were no significant inconsistencies in his testimony. When the police asked Su if he had the keys to the family's house, he said no. The police continued to investigate the area. When the police questioned the villagers about Su, they discovered that he had been dishonest. Villagers confirmed that Su often went to the house to work and could open both the gate and the door himself, even when no one else was there. This suggested that he might have had a key to the house. In fact, he did have a key, as Zhu Wang saw Xing Fai hand the key to Su at the university office, asking Su to get the key for him. Later, when the police returned to Su's house to ask about the key, he denied having the key again. He claimed that he had used the spare key for renovations but had returned it, so he said he could not enter the house. During this interrogation, Su seemed much more nervous than during the first interrogation, and he deliberately avoided important details. When the police threatened to search his house, Su panicked and suddenly remembered that he actually had another house key that he had not returned. He then took the key from the closet and gave it to the police. Although Su's behavior was suspicious, there was no concrete evidence linking him to the family's disappearance, so the police decided to keep an eye on him while they continued their investigation. They used a spare key to enter Xing Fai's home, where they found the interior in disarray, suggesting a break-in. The police also found some fresh blood stains on the walls, suggesting that someone had been murdered in the house. In the kitchen, they found a sink full of dirty dishes, which raised doubts about the idea that the family had traveled to China, as they would not have left the house in such a state. In the couple's master bedroom, the police discovered the family's identity cards in the wardrobe. The police contacted the border office and confirmed that the family had never left Hong Kong. As they continued their search, officers found a bloody shirt in the next room and a bloody plastic water pipe in the corner of the room. Police deployed sniffer dogs to collect more evidence and were able to locate the missing family. The dogs picked up a scent, leading them to bloodstains found under the freshly dug soil. In addition, despite it being summer vacation, the couple's two children, Hiu Man and Hiu Wing, had enrolled in summer school, indicating that the family was not on vacation. A special task force was therefore set up to investigate the case. Police sealed off the scene and blocked the entrances to Ping Chi village to outsiders while placing Su Xingqi under house arrest as the prime suspect. Su quickly confessed to the police. He revealed that he was from Huangpu in Guangdong province and usually lived with his sister, wife, and two sons, aged 15 and 16. He used to support himself by selling motorcycles in Junction City, but in 2006, Guangdong imposed a motorcycle ban, which led to a decline in sales. Faced with financial difficulties, he contacted Xing Fai in Hong Kong to seek help in finding a job in the city. Xing Fai helped Su get a construction job that paid 500 Hong Kong dollars a day, including food and accommodation. However, after working for 2 weeks, Su was unhappy because after deductions, he only received 220 Hong Kong dollars. Frustrated, he quit the job without notice and returned to China. In 2007, after Typhoon Pabuk severely damaged his house, Su returned to Hong Kong because the repair costs were too expensive. He asked Xing Fai to help him find another job in Hong Kong. When Xing Fai couldn't find another job, Su Xingqi offered to repair the house, do gardening, and do housework around Xing Fai's house. And Xing Fai would pay Su. Xing Fai agreed to the deal, so every 2 months, Su would come to Hong Kong to help with housework, mainly gardening and repairing the house. During this time, Su began to notice Helen Tong Yen, who was later discovered by Xing Fai. On July 3rd, Su arrived in Hong Kong. 2 days later, on July 5th, Xing Fai took Su to visit his mother at the nursing home. After the visit, Su sneaked out to go home first to harass Helen Tong Yen. However, Xing Fai came home earlier than expected and caught him. Enraged, Xing Fai rushed at Su. In a panic, Su grabbed a 25-centimeter-long fruit knife and stabbed Xing Fai, causing him to collapse in a pool of blood and die. Horrified by what he had just done, Su considered calling the police. However, he did not. Su then thought of a way to silence Xing Fai's wife, Helen Tong Yen, and prevent her from calling the police. Su grabbed some wire from the corner of the room and rushed towards her, knocking her to the ground and tying her hands behind her back. He then covered her mouth and nose with tape and put a plastic bag over her head. Meanwhile, the couple's 2 children were in the bedroom watching cartoons. Helen Tong Yen shouted for them to run away, but instead they ran towards her and found their father dead and Su attacking their mother. In fear, they ran back to their room, crying and locking the door. Since she was tied up, Su left Helen Tong Yen behind and chased after the children. Hearing the noise, Hiu Man and Hiu Wing saw Su holding a pair of pliers. He pried open the door and used more electric wires to attack both of them. He tied their hands behind their backs, taped their mouths and noses, and put plastic bags over their heads. After leaving the bedroom, he returned to find that both children had stopped breathing. Hee-man and Hee-wing suffocated shortly after. After killing the entire family, Sue was at a loss for what to do next. He returned home to think things over. He felt that hiding the bodies in a ditch or pond would be too easy to discover, and that dismembering them would be tiring and time-consuming. Instead, he decided to bury the bodies in their own home. On July 6th, he returned home to clean up as much blood as possible. He then dug a hole deep and wide enough to fit the bodies of the 4 family members and quickly placed them inside. He also threw the murder weapon into the hole before filling it up. Although he was skeptical of his motives, the police accepted the rest of his testimony. They took Sue back to the house, where he pointed out where a sharp knife, a water pipe, a pair of pliers, and other tools used in the crime were. The fire department was called to assist in exhuming the buried body. Firefighters arrived equipped with digging tools and gas masks, as the bodies were buried near a septic tank. They began digging but soon encountered a significant obstacle: they hit cement. Sue had left out a crucial detail in his confession, pouring cement before covering it up. The firefighters could not determine the thickness of the cement, and since the cement had hardened, their tools were ineffective. The police then hired a private engineering company, which brought in specialized equipment to drill through the concrete slab. When the team drilled into the hole and discovered human hair, they panicked and refused to continue, fearing that they might reach the body. It took the police 13 hours to persuade them to continue. After digging, the hole was 2.54 meters wide and 6 feet deep. They finally discovered the bodies of a family, all barefoot and wearing only t-shirts and shorts. At the bottom was Xing Fai's body, his hands and feet tied with electric wire, with multiple stab wounds to his stomach, back, and neck, and his clothes soaked in blood. Hee-man and Hee-wing's mouths and noses were taped, their hands and feet were tied, and the children's faces looked distorted. Helen Tong-yan's condition was similar. Her face was distorted, her hands and feet were tied, her mouth and nose were covered, and her eyes were covered with transparent tape. Su Xingqi was arrested, and during interrogation, he admitted that he had flirted with a woman. She felt uncomfortable and informed Xing Fai about the incident. Xing Fai becomes angry and kicks Su out of their home, forbidding him from returning. On July 3rd, Su returned home to start work, and his relationship with his cousin seemed to have improved. However, on July 4th, he again behaved inappropriately towards Helen Tong-yan. While Xing Fai was away, Su attempted to molest her. She escaped and locked herself in her room while calling for help. Not wanting to attract the attention of the neighbors, Su angrily left the house. On July 5th, Su and Xing Fai went to the nursing home, but he left first. Anticipating this, Xing Fai returned home early and found Su at his home and was trying to get in to talk to Helen Tong-yan. An argument ensued, and in the heat of the moment, Su stabbed Xing Fai. The rest of his confession was consistent with his initial statement but added the detail that he had filled the makeshift grave with cement. However, after the bodies were sent for autopsy, it became clear that Su's testimony was false. Xing Fai's murder was much more brutal than Su had claimed. Xing Fai had been stabbed 9 times in the head and neck, nearly 80 times in the body, and 10 times in the arms and legs. Instead of being suffocated with a plastic bag, he had been strangled. Forensic investigations showed that the cutlery and dishes in the house did not contain the family's DNA, but did contain Su's DNA. The weapon Su used was not a family kitchen knife, but a knife he owned. Furthermore, the cement used to bury the body had been purchased before the murder, suggesting that the crime was premeditated. Police discovered that bank cards had been used at ATMs after the time of death, but could not be withdrawn due to repeated incorrect PIN entries. In addition, the victim's cash and bank cards were missing, suggesting robbery as the motive behind the crime. Whenever the police pointed out inconsistencies in Su's testimony, he would quickly come up with another explanation. He claimed that his ancestral home in China needed urgent repairs while his 2 children were in school and he needed $100,000 in cash to pay for it. During his visits to Hong Kong, he did not earn much money, which prompted him to seek help from Xing Fai. Su believed that Xing Fai was actually rich but acted like a miser, and he thought that the low wages he received while working for Xing Fai were because they were exploiting him as cheap labor. On July 3, Su returned to Hong Kong alone without informing anyone. He waits until July 5, when Xing Fai has a day off from work. While Xing Fai is at the nursing home, Su, armed with a hidden knife, knocks on his door. When Xing Fai returns and finds Su there, he invites him to cook something while they talk. As soon as Su enters the kitchen, he suddenly asks to borrow 100,000 Hong Kong dollars. Xing Fai refuses and explains to Su that the money was for his mother's medical treatment and his children's education. Su does not want to accept this answer and accuses Xing Fai of just wanting to use him as cheap labor. This accusation angers Xing Fai, and when Su continues to press the issue, Xing Fai tells him to leave. As Xing Fai turns to leave, Su lunges at him, covering his mouth before stabbing him in the back. He then threatened Hiu Man and Hiu Wing, ransacked the house for cash and bank cards, and demanded the card passwords. Xing Fai pretended to provide a fake password, which Su did not realize was invalid at the time. Su also lied about strangling the others and claimed that he killed them by covering their mouths and noses with tape and putting plastic bags over their heads. When Su went to the nearest ATM, he discovered that he had been scammed because his PIN did not work. When he returned home, he discovered that people had suffocated while he was away. Seeing the food he had prepared, he decided to sit and eat next to the 4 corpses while thinking of what to do with them. After stealing 6,000 Hong Kong dollars from Xing Fai, he buried the corpses and the tools he used in a small hole before going to sleep at his stone house. The next morning, Su realized that the smell from the buried corpses might give them away. To prevent this, he went to buy cement, dug up the hole, poured cement in it, and covered it up. He decided to stay at home for a while to answer any calls to Xing Fai's cell phone or home phone, telling anyone who asked that he was keeping an eye on things while they were away on vacation. Su did not expect the deception to be discovered so quickly. Even then, he continued to lie about several details, including how he had purchased cement before the incident and the circumstances surrounding the victims' deaths. At that point, the police were no longer focused on obtaining a true confession, believing they had enough evidence to proceed. The trial took place in the Hong Kong High Court on October 28, 2010, where he pleaded not guilty. He claimed that his previous statement about having an affair with Helen Tong Yen was correct, asserting that he killed her in self-defense and that the deaths of Hiu Man and Hiu Wing were accidental. On November 23, the jury returned a verdict in which Su Xingqi was sentenced to life imprisonment for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of manslaughter. The judge declared that Su Xingqi had no conscience, was worse than an animal, and had no remorse. He accused Su of fabricating his self-defense testimony and his relationship with Helen Tong Yen, not to receive a lighter sentence, but simply to tarnish their reputations after death. Su Xingqi's family from Hong Kong defended him against Xing Fai's accusations, claiming that Xing Fai was a hypocrite and a real villain, using Su as cheap labor and taking a portion of his wages. This defense angered neighbors and residents of Ping Chi village, forcing Su's family to return to China to escape the negative backlash. The crime itself was one of the most shocking in Hong Kong's history. Tam Xing Fai's family received a significant outpouring of support, with many people visiting to offer their condolences and netizens donating enough money to pay for the funeral. In addition, The family's 9 stray dogs were adopted by another family and taken for a walk every July 5th near their old home. On August 9, 2022, Su Xingqi died of liver cancer at the age of 55 in Stanley Prison, Hong Kong. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Luisa Cedeno. On July 18, 2020, Maria Luisa Cedeno arrived at the Lam Mission Inn Hotel in Manuel Antonio, in the Costa Rican province of Puntarenas. She was traveling with her little dog named Mafalda, it she treated like a daughter. The first day passed without incident. Maria Luisa went to the beach, had lunch at a restaurant, and drank some alcohol, activities common for tourists. However, the following day, everything changed. At 4:30 p.m. sharp, Maria requested that a bottle of wine, mineral water, and 2 glasses be brought to her room. It's worth noting that she didn't mention being with anyone, and everyone around her was convinced that she wanted to rest alone. Throughout the entire afternoon and night, no movement was recorded in her room. On July 20th, the hotel staff tried to contact her, but they received no response. A staff member had previously spoken with Maria, who mentioned that she lived alone because she had recently separated from her boyfriend, was not feeling well, and was only traveling with her small dog, Mafalda. Since several months had passed since the official start of the pandemic, Maria said that this had also affected her mental health, which was deteriorating. Considering everything she had been through, she said she needed a vacation. Therefore, the hotel staff decided to enter the room to check regularly, in case of any unforeseen circumstances. The front door was locked from the inside, so they looked for another way in and checked the door leading to the patio. This room had an emergency exit for guests with pets. They had previously opened the patio door so the dog could go outside. When the staff approached this exit, they found the door half open. Upon entering, they were hit by a terrible odor and saw blood stains throughout the room. The dog was alive, trembling in a corner and avoiding the staff, likely due to trauma or fear. The lifeless body of Maria was found lying motionless on the bed, wrapped in a sheet. Maria Luisa Cedeno was a highly respected anesthesiologist. At 43, she led the Department of Anesthesiology and Rehabilitation at Sima Hospital in Escazú. Her colleagues admired her greatly, and during the early pandemic, she was notably committed to helping patients in need. As a medical professional, she provided significant support to her loved ones, arranging health insurance, assisting with medical appointments. Maria's parents lived in San Carlos, which made it difficult for her to be with her family all the time. Friends described her as a strong, intelligent, and likable woman who loved traveling both within Costa Rica and internationally. Her reputation was impeccable. The news of Maria's death was a tremendous shock to her family and Costa Rica. People were left asking, who would want to harm someone like Maria? From the moment the hotel staff discovered the lifeless Maria body, the mysteries of this case began. The crime scene is confusing, not only because of the brutality Maria endured, but also because of the mysteries that arise as soon as they enter the hotel room she rented. Like most hotels worldwide, this hotel keeps a record of the magnetic keys used for the rooms. This means that each time a room is accessed, the card used is recorded, and the key's code is identified. This system allows they to determine whether the person accessing the room was a guest or a hotel employee. In Maria's murder, there was no record of any other keys being used other than hers. Maria had entered her room alone the previous night, with no one else entering through the main door. However, the room had a sliding glass door at the back that could be used as an alternative entry point. Since this door could only be locked from the inside, it is possible that Maria left the door unlocked, either intentionally letting someone in or accidentally leaving the door open. This allowed someone to enter and commit the murder. As the door didn't have an electronic lock system, there was no record of anyone entering or exiting through it. This was considered the most logical explanation at the time. After discovering Maria's body, hotel staff immediately contacted the police. Upon examining the scene, it was clear that she had been brutally murdered. Her body showed severe damage, indicating that she had been tortured by someone who was extremely enraged. Forensic experts collected evidence and analyzed every detail to determine the cause of death and identify the perpetrator. The authorities recommended a closed casket at the funeral due to the extreme level of brutality inflicted upon Maria. An autopsy was later performed, which showed that the body had multiple bite marks and 2 broken fingernails, indicating that Maria attempted to defend herself. The autopsy also revealed that the killer cleaned the she-body after the murder. According to the investigator, Maria was killed in the bedroom, as evidenced by the large amount of blood found on the bed. The killer then moved the body to the bathroom, washed and dried it, wrapped it in a sheet, and placed it back on the bed. Although the killer attempted to wash the Maria body to eliminate evidence, this proved nearly impossible due to the extensive presence of blood throughout the room. Blood stains were found on the floor, walls, curtains, and bed, indicating the brutality of the attack. The forensic experts took photographs and collected as much physical evidence as possible from the scene. The body was then sent for an autopsy, and the police started interviewing the hotel staff and guests who may have witnessed or heard something. Given the state of the crime scene, it is likely that Maria screamed violently and her dog barked loudly during the attack. However, no one reported hearing any screams throughout the night. The hotel was relatively empty, but there were still a few people working at the hotel, and the hotel owner, Harry Bowden, who lived there with his husband Dano, were also present there. Additionally, Harry had allowed some acquaintances to stay at the hotel due to their financial difficulties. A bottle of wine and 2 glasses were found in Maria's hotel room. The wine had been ordered from room service. Later, investigators examined Maria's cell phone and found that she had sent a photo of the 2 glasses to a friend. However, the message did not indicate that she was with someone or she was waiting for someone to come to her room. She also sent an audio message to the same friend describing the hotel's all-inclusive package and its benefits. Maria seemed pleased with the service, mentioning that staff would bring her drinks, fruit, and other treats. She also mentioned interacting with hotel staff, including the bartender and hotelier's assistant, and noted that the owner was Dutch. Although she acknowledged the hotel is a bit worn out and understaffed, she expressed her overall satisfaction with her stay. The room cost 155,000 colons per night. Authorities investigating Maria's murder spoke with her friends and relatives to identify suspect. They discovered that she often ordered 2 glasses, even when alone, to have 1 for alcohol and 1 for water. This suggested she wasn't waiting for anyone at the time of the attack. The investigation revisited the initial theory: the attacker must have been someone who saw Maria in the hotel, noticed the back door was open and attacked her. However, the extreme brutality of the crime suggests that the killer had deep hatred and anger towards the victim, and often the killer knew the victim. Even so, there is no evidence that Maria was with anyone or had enemies at the time of her death. The autopsy revealed additional details about Maria's death, including signs of strangulation, blows to her face, arms, and chest, and evidence of abuse. After analyzing the autopsy results, conducting interviews with family, friends, and hotel staff, authorities concluded that the attack was likely carried out by multiple individuals. This theory was based on the fact that there were no reports of Maria screaming during the attack. Authorities believed that at least 2 attackers were involved, and they took complete control of Maria. Some investigators even suggested that a 3rd person may have been involved, as the victim showed signs of abuse. According to this theory, 2 assailants held Maria Luisa down and a 3rd raped her. All of this is evidenced by the fact that when her body was analyzed, there was no sign of rope or anything to indicate that she was tied up. Police speculated that the men may have stuffed something into Maria's mouth to stop her from screaming or to prevent her screams from being heard, in order to carry out the attack undetected. The cause of death was determined to be a head injury, which could have occurred in several ways. It might have been caused by a violent blow to the head, by being undressed, as there was evidence of fractured vertebrae, or by being hit with an object or falling heavily to the floor. Overall, what the assailants did to Maria was an atrocity, and without clear motivation. The first suspect was quickly identified because this man, who was staying at the hotel, had numerous fresh wounds resembling scratches and blows, suggesting he had been defending himself. Upon investigation, it was revealed to be Teodoro Herrera Martinez, an exotic dancer working in the city's nightclubs and staying at the hotel at the time of the murder. Teodoro was arrested when authorities were looking for evidence that he was involved in the murder. The man's footprints were compared to those at the crime scene. 2 matching prints were found on the black ceramic tile floor in front of the bed in the bedroom. A short time later, a second suspect named Luis Carlos Miranda was arrested. A hotel security guard had seen him walking in the hallways at night with Teodoro. Because Torreira was already in custody, Luis needed to be questioned to check for any links to the case. Additionally, tests revealed that his dental records matched the bite marks on Maria's body. Hotel employees testified that they saw Maria talking to Luis and, on one occasion, to Teodoro. However, their interactions were casual, like simple greetings, rather than those of acquaintances or friends. This might be because there were very few guests at the hotel, so they may have passed each other many times. Earlier, the hotel owner allowed 2 friends, Luis and Teodoro, to stay on the property due to financial difficulties. The police decided to question the owner of the hotel, Harry Bowden, after finding matching footprints and bite marks from the 2 suspects, Luis and Teodoro. During questioning, Harry revealed that on the night of the murder, July 19, 2020, he and husband were having dinner in their apartment within the hotel with Luis and Teodoro. After dinner, the 4 men went to a private pool. Harry also disclosed that Luis and Teodoro worked for him in exchange for accommodation. Luis managed the website and marketing, while Teodoro worked as a cook and bartender. The hotel owners and Luis and Teodoro were not close friends initially, but after moving into the hotel a year before the murder, they started spending more time together, going out for meals and socializing. And thus, the 4 men became friends. Although Harry cooperated by giving an interview in August 2020, but he was arrested because bite marks found on Maria's body matched his dental records, which began to reveal the truth. The police confiscated the phones of all the detainees and found text messages between Luis and Harry that turned out to be very compromising. In these messages, Luis invited Harry to have an intimate relationship with a woman he had been following. This exchange happened several days before the incident. However, Luis and Harry claimed that the messages didn't mean anything and that they were just joking, but that, along with the physical evidence, was enough for the authorities to keep them in jail while the case was being put together. The only person not arrested was Harry's husband. Because there was no evidence against him, no text messages, no fingerprints, and the bite marks didn't match those on Maria's body. Luis, Harry, and Teodoro's defense argued that the bite mark evidence was inconclusive and that none of them were involved in the murder. Despite this, the 3 men were charged with the murder of Maria. Before the trial, Harry's lawyer requested that he be released and placed under house arrest for 2 reasons. First, due to Harry being 69 years old, staying in jail was risky. Second, he had difficulty walking due to recent knee surgery. The defense claimed he had been using a cane for a long time, and at the trial's start, he appeared in a wheelchair. Because of this request, he was placed under house arrest and returned to the hotel where he was staying, and he couldn't leave the hotel. On September 13, 2022, the trial of Luis, Harry, and Teodoro began, where evidence against them was presented. The prosecution struggled to prove the involvement of Harry and Luis. They had text messages and bite marks on Maria's body as evidence. However, the bite marks couldn't definitively identify the murderer, they could only exclude suspects. All hotel employees were ruled out as suspects, but not these two, Harry and Luis. In contrast, Teodoro had the most evidence against him. There was a blood trail, and he had wounds inflicted by Maria during her self-defense, as his blood was found under her fingernails. Blood was also found on his shoes, watch, and cell phone, located in his room during the search. Given this evidence, only Teodoro Herrera Martinez was convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison, while Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda were acquitted due to a lack of physical evidence. Many people believe that Luis and Harry were involved in the murder because the hotel security cameras mysteriously stopped working on the day it happened. This suggests that someone might have planned it. A hotel security guard was also suspected, but he and the other two individuals could not be arrested due to a lack of evidence. Strangely, the guard left for another country after the murder, even though the police asked him to attend the trial as a witness. There are several aspects of this case that suggest more people might be involved. For example, two guests told the police that the hotel experienced a power outage for many hours on the night of the murder, which may have been intentional. This could have been done to disable the security cameras and the magnetic keys. A peculiar detail is that 9 days after the murder, investigators searched Harry's private office, which may have given him enough time to destroy any evidence. They not only analyzed text messages but also looked at Luis and Harry's social media accounts, where they discovered discussions about an idea directly related to how to find Maria's body. Legally, Harry and Luis are presumed innocent. The only person in prison for this murder is Teodoro Herrera Martinez, who is awaiting a new trial to see if his sentence can be reduced. Although the case is solved, but the Maria family suspects something is being hidden. They suspect a defense or cover-up. The family reported that the authorities returned Maria's belongings soaked in blood, which they find puzzling because they wanted to preserve the evidence in case new information emerged. They are satisfied with Teodoro's conviction but not with the acquittal of Harry and Luis. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shurtha and Leon Brits. Our story takes place in a small town called PAF, South Africa, with a population of about 3,000 people. In 1979, Leon Brits was born there. He had a brother named Toki. Their father owned a local hotel and other businesses, providing a comfortable living for the family. Leon was a bright and hardworking student who excelled in school and was active in sports. As a teenager, he started working in the family's hotel, learning to manage the business and assisting his father. Once his brother was old enough, the Leon brothers worked together. The Leon were a close-knit family, respected throughout the area. When Toki turned 18, he left their small town, but Leon remained with his parents. Leon dreamed of taking over the family hotel business, which frequently hosted large events and parties. At one of these events, Leon noticed a stunning girl with chestnut hair and eyes. He couldn't stop looking at her and decided to introduce himself. However, the girl, Shurtha, had just turned 14, although she appeared older, while Leon was already 25. Shurtha was born on September 6, 1990, and was the youngest of 4 siblings. Suritha's family lived in poverty, and their situation became worse when her father died of a poisonous spider bite. Her mother was left to raise 3 children on her own. Shurtha endured hardships with her family for many years. Suritha's family barely had enough money to buy food, making the future of the children very bleak. Then Leon, who came from a wealthy family, met Shurtha and fell in love with her despite their large age gap. Shurtha, a schoolgirl, was also drawn to Leon. They started talking, and Leon pursued her with extravagance, taking her to fancy places and giving her expensive gifts. This left a strong impression on Shurtha, who was extremely grateful to Leon. She realized she could build a future with him without lacking anything. Their relationship blossomed as Shurtha enjoyed Leon's attention, and Leon loved her very much. A few months later, Leon expressed his wish to marry Shurtha, and his mother approved after meeting her. They then began dating officially, and their relationship seemed perfect. However, when Shurtha turned 15, her classmates noticed changes in her behavior. She started wearing loose-fitting clothes, avoided showing her belly, and became very shy, as if she didn't want to be approached. Eventually, Shurtha told Leon that she suspected she might be pregnant. Leon was very upset, as a pregnancy could result in accusations of statutory rape since he was already 26 years old. Leon, who controlled the relationship, had initiated their intimacy. To address Saritha's suspicions, he gave her money to visit the clinic, where the doctor confirmed she was pregnant with twins. When she told Leon the news, he became angry and insisted she not keep the pregnancy, giving her money for an abortion. Despite her hesitation, the pressure from Leon and their age difference compelled her to comply. She went to the clinic alone and followed Leon's demands. Leon wasn't opposed to having a family and children, but he believed everything had its proper time and that they should wait until she was at least an adult. After the procedure, when Shurtha returned from the clinic, her mental health was severely impacted. Leon thought that taking walks would help her recover quickly, not realizing she was in a lot of pain. Her emotional recovery needed more time. Shurtha eventually overcame the trauma, and their romantic relationship continued. Leon still wanted children but asked her to wait. By the end of 2008, Shurtha was in her final year of school, preparing for her exams. At 18, she became pregnant again and told Leon about it. Leon was unhappy once more, but this time, Shurtha refused to have another abortion. She was now old enough to make her own decisions. Shurtha insisted on keeping the child and decided not to follow Leon's wishes. He agreed. She graduated from school in early 2009 while pregnant. Shurtha and Leon decided to get married. Although Leon was uncertain about marriage, they had come too far in their relationship, so they went ahead with the wedding. Shurtha had her first child a year later, twin boys. The couple was very happy. After the twins were born, Leon's father passed away, and his mother began to suffer from age-related problems that made it difficult for her to manage the family business. Leon and his brother decided to put their mother in a nursing home so that she could receive proper care. Leon then took full control of the hotel. During this time, he also owned a mining equipment store and a restaurant, both of which were aimed at serving miners by providing food at their workplaces. He also owned rental properties. These ventures generated a good income for the family, allowing them to live comfortably. Due to his heavy workload, Leon decided to involve his wife in the family business. He didn't pressure her, as she had already wanted to start working in business. Leon entrusted her with managing the equipment store. She began handling supplies while caring for their two young children, which made managing the business challenging. Although she couldn't take on a large workload, she managed to handle her responsibilities effectively. By this time, the children had grown up and started school. In South Africa, getting an education can be a challenge as not every small town has educational facilities and the quality is often subpar. Ensuring the best quality education often requires daily travel between cities. However, Saritha's family rented a house in a nearby major city for the duration of the children's schooling. Leon decided to send the children to Kakumahi with Shurtha. She had to take care of the children herself and give up her business. They only visited Leon on weekends to spend time with him. At first, everything seemed fine, but over time, the distance between the spouses became more apparent. The children couldn't communicate with their father regularly, and Shurtha rarely saw her husband. Their relationship grew much colder than it was at the beginning of their marriage. In 2017, Shurtha began experiencing health issues. She was diagnosed with cancer, heart problems, and arthritis. She underwent surgery to remove the tumor, which saved her life by preventing the disease from progressing. To address her other health issues, Shurtha started traveling to Johannesburg every month to receive special treatments from specialists at a clinic. All of this was funded by Leon, who genuinely wanted to help Shurtha and supported her while continuing to manage the business. The biggest challenge during this period was taking care of the children, but the couple solved it by hiring a nanny to help. The family business was very profitable, and Leon's workplace and home were both equipped with safes. Thanks to the extensive business, Leon became wealthy, but at the cost of having to work long hours without days off. In addition, getting rich in a poor country is very dangerous. Because he had unintentionally attracted many people who were jealous of his life. Starting in 2017, Leon encountered problems in his business, which led to many people publicly threatening him. At this time, Leon confided in his wife that he felt unsafe and feared for his life. The couple discussed these issues regularly to ease his anxiety, but the situation did not improve. Gradually, the threats became a regular occurrence. Leon began to ignore the threatening messages, as they came almost every day over trivial matters. A few years later, a terrible tragedy occurred on October 7, 2020. After a brief phone call with Shurtha, her husband returned home to check on the dogs. He then stopped communicating, which worried Shurtha. She decided to go home to check on him. That day, after arriving home and going inside, the house was strangely quiet and empty. Shurtha searched every room and finally discovered Leon's body floating in the pool. In shock, she contacted Leon's brother and then called the police to report her husband's death. Leon's brother and the hotel manager were the first to arrive at the scene of the tragedy, followed shortly by the police. It was clear that Leon's death was no accident. He had been brutally beaten before falling into the pool, suggesting that it was likely a targeted killing. Police quickly noticed that apart from a broken safe, no valuables had been stolen, despite the fact that there were plenty of items worth stealing in the house. This seemed unusual, as thieves usually stole anything of value. The case quickly attracted widespread attention and became a major topic in the South African media. Social networks are full of rumors and speculation. Rumor has it that the businessman has many serious enemies and has received threats. Some say that people who had quarrels with Leon may have been involved in the case. The police receive reports from random people every day, and it takes them a long time to process so many false complaints. Initially, Leon's brother Toki was suspected of being the culprit because he was seen at the crime scene shortly before Leon's death. The suspected motive was their mother's will, which was kept in Leon's safe, and Toki wanted to amend the document for fear of losing his inheritance. At the time, their mother was seriously ill and left a will. The police attempted to prove that there had been serious conflicts between them over the matter, but they were unsuccessful. Toki insisted that there had been no conflict, saying that his meetings with Leon were very normal and that they did not usually argue about money. Toki sought comfort from Shurtha, who believed he was innocent and promised to find him the best lawyer. The housekeeper knew about the cameras in the house and informed the police, which gave them access to the footage. They also collected recordings from cameras at the entrance to the house. Briso Shurid, the housekeeper, was brought to the station to help identify the people in the footage. But she was unable to recognize anyone. The police had no solid leads. Leon's brother Toki remains a suspect due to a possible inheritance dispute, but without evidence against him, the case has been dropped. A few months later, Jacques van Vuren, 37, contacted the police and told the whole truth about Leon's murder. Because the criminal wanted to confess in exchange for a lighter sentence and agreed to expose all his accomplices. It turned out that in the Schurther family, things were not as rosy as they seemed. The couple's distance not only cooled their relationship, but also completely destroyed it. One day, Schurther took her husband's mobile phone and discovered photos of other women. At that time, she herself was unfaithful to Leon. Schurther was beautiful and attracted to many men. At the time of her marriage, she had a brief relationship with a lover. But during her medical treatment in Johannesburg, she developed a more serious relationship. She visited her lover every time she went to the hospital for treatment, during which time their relationship deepened. She considered leaving her husband. This seemed pretty straightforward since they lived in separate homes and rarely communicated. Not long after, she asked her husband for a divorce. It is unclear whether she simply wanted to end her relationship with her husband to be with her lover or whether she intended to marry him. Leon did not know about the betrayal, but he was shocked by his wife's desire for a divorce. At first, he reacted very violently and expressed his grief. Then he calmed down and threatened that if she filed for divorce, he would take everything from her, including money and children. Memories of her poor childhood still haunted her. Due to pressure from her husband, Schurther had to give up her plans. She no longer loved her husband Leon, but she did not want to lose everything. In desperation, Schurther turned to her lover, who lived near Johannesburg, to see if he could help her leave her husband. She repeatedly asked him for help, but he refused. He tried to convince her that it was a bad idea. Eventually, she stopped making these requests. One day, Schurther was talking to her lover. During the conversation, she said that she no longer had to worry about her husband because a classmate was willing to help resolve the situation. At first, her lover took these words as a joke and the couple never brought up the subject again. However, it was not a joke. Schurther was actually talking to her classmate, Jacques van Vuren. At the time, Jacques was going through a difficult time. He had just divorced and his ex-wife had moved out with the children. He had also been injured at work, forcing him to reduce his hours and income. Despite this, he still had to pay child support, which led to serious financial difficulties. In the face of these difficulties, Jacques relapsed into drug addiction, which drove his wife away from him. Schurther and Jacques met again by chance at a barbecue, where he confided in her about his troubles. Schurther decided to take advantage of this opportunity. She had obtained Jacques' phone number. Schurther contacted Jacques. She said that her husband had been abusing her for years, so she wanted to get away from his control. And Jacques believed her. He was extremely disgusted by Leon's behavior. Schurther had reached Jacques' limit, as he had had a difficult childhood. He lived with an abusive father who had physically and mentally abused him, leaving him traumatized, and Sarita's story was effective. Finally, he agreed to help Schurther resolve her situation. She promised to pay 400,000 rand, a large sum that could help Jacques solve all his financial problems. During this time, Leon's business was struggling. His hardware store and restaurant had also closed. The estate was abandoned and did not generate any income. The Leon family had been living off their savings, but with the high costs of maintaining their lifestyle, their financial reserves began to run out. In this context, Leon often quarreled with his wife. Their relationship began to fall apart, which only made the situation worse. Finally, Schurther decided to get rid of her husband again. She contacted Jacques, who asked for half the money in advance. Schurther withdrew 70,000 rand and met Jacques to discuss the plan. She promised to give the remaining money through her housekeeper, who worked for Leon and had moved into her house to help with the housework. The next day, she gave Jacques an envelope containing 1,000 rand. With the deposit, Jacques hired his university friend Enrich Williams. Enrich initially refused to participate in the murder, but due to financial difficulties, when Jacques offered him a large sum of money, he could not resist and agreed. Enrich was 34 at the time and worried that he couldn't handle Leon on his own. So he found a place to stay, Amantal Bariki, a recent college graduate. Amantal, just 24, had studied engineering and dreamed of building his own house. Like many others, he was struggling financially. When he was told of the amount of money involved, Amantal agreed to help. Then the plan entered a careful preparation phase. Shurtha filmed a video showing the layout of the house and discussed the attack with the criminals. Shurtha let the criminals into the house so they could hide behind a large sofa in the living room. Her role was to lure her husband into the house while she was receiving treatment in Johannesburg. Jacques was not allowed in the area because witnesses could identify him as a friend of the couple. So Enrich and Amantal had to carry out the attack. Shurtha insisted that the attack looked like a robbery, so she allowed the criminals to take whatever they wanted from the house. She also asked that Suritha's beloved dogs be kept safe. To distract the dogs, they bought a package of sausages. The sausages were scattered around the yard to lure the dogs away. A rehearsal was scheduled for early October, but was cancelled when Leon's brother Toki visited on October 5th and stayed overnight. The attackers had everything ready and planned to burn clothes and any other evidence after the murder to avoid leaving any clues for the police. While waiting for the signal to start, Jacques tried to calm down. He broke his rule of staying away from the area where Leon would be killed by driving past the house several times before returning to wait for the signal to continue. At around 6 a.m. the next day, while Leon was at work, the attackers entered the house and hid behind the sofa. At 10 a.m., Shurtha called Leon to say that, according to the housekeeper, the dogs were missing. Leon needed to go back to look for them, which seemed normal to him, so he returned to the house, unaware that his attackers were waiting inside. As Leon entered the living room and turned around, the attack began. He was stabbed in the back by Amantal with a knife. Despite being caught off guard, Leon fought back. During the struggle, Enrich grabbed a baseball bat and began beating Leon. Leon fell to the ground. He was stabbed 8 times, and then they used a dog collar to strangle him to death before stealing his wallet. They then carried Leon and threw him into the pool. Then went back into the house, opened the safe, and stole money in diamonds. They fled the scene after carrying out their plan. At the time, Shurtha was in Johannesburg for treatment, which gave her an alibi. After learning about the incident, Shurtha returned home, where she discovered her husband's body. Later, when Shurtha was invited to the police station to view the surveillance camera footage, she noticed her old school friend Jacques in the video. Although his face was not visible, the footage captured his car driving suspiciously past their house twice. Shurtha did not claim to recognize the car, but the police took notice of it, although the license plate was unclear. While the investigation was ongoing, Shurtha used a disposable phone to avoid detection and keep their conversations from being monitored. It turned out that Shurtha had provided the police with information regarding Toki and tried to blame him for her husband's death. Shurtha had gone to great lengths to play the role of a grieving widow. Even after the funeral, Toki remained unsuspecting and continued to contact Shurtha, supporting her during this difficult time. During this time, Toki began to notice significant changes in Suritha's behavior. She no longer appeared to be a grieving widow. In fact, she had gotten a tattoo, despite Leon's constant objection to her getting one. In addition, Shurtha began riding a motorcycle, which Leon was also adamantly against. She began wearing more revealing and provocative clothing, along with heavy, aggressive makeup, which had always annoyed Leon when he was alive. Despite all these changes, Toki remains unaware of Suritha's involvement in the crime. During this time, Shurtha suffered financial hardship as her family assets were frozen due to the ongoing investigation. She was unable to pay the remaining 200,000 rand to the killers and had no personal savings. The killers became angry and began to threaten her. Jacques regularly contacted her to demand money, but Shurtha continued to delay payment by insisting that the assets were still frozen. The situation became so bad that she hired a bodyguard to move into her home. The bodyguard began helping to look after the children, leading neighbors to assume that he was her new partner. Jacques also received threats from Enrich and Amantel, the killers, as he was responsible for paying the remaining amount to them, but he could not do so without money from Shurtha. On one occasion, Jacques went to visit his sister and received several threats along the way, which made him fearful. Under emotional pressure, he confessed to his sister about the murder, and she informed their mother. His sister then tried to convince him to go to the police and confess, and he finally agreed. This led to the full truth about the murder being revealed. When the police arrived at Saritha's house, she said that she was upset because Leon did not approve her divorce and refused to pay for her medical treatment. However, there was no evidence in their correspondence to substantiate her claims. The possible motive for her decision to kill her husband was that he was planning to sell the dilapidated hotel. She, who had become accustomed to a lavish lifestyle, did not want to sell it. Meanwhile, Leon's main goal in selling the hotel was to pay off his debts and spend more time with his family. He had neglected his children and wife, so he planned to retire and pursue a quieter, more settled life with them. Unfortunately, this decision eventually led to his death. Jacques van Vuren was sentenced to 25 years in prison, eligible for parole in up to 5 years, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. In exchange for his cooperation, he agreed to testify against others involved in the massacre. Enrich Williams and Amantel Bariki were also arrested and sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Leon Brits. On March 19, 2021, police arrested Shurtha Brits. She quickly pleaded guilty to murder and armed robbery. As a result, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison for murder and 15 years in prison for armed robbery, both sentences to run concurrently. Because she pleaded guilty, she will have the opportunity to be paroled with minimal restrictions. Throughout the trial, Shurtha portrayed herself as the victim in her relationship with Leon, which began when she was 14 years old. He pressured her to have an abortion and controlled many aspects of her life. Although there was no evidence of physical violence or suffering, the Supreme Court accepted her claims. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sophia Urrutia. The Urrutia family lived in Canning Vale, a suburb of Perth with about 35,000 residents. The family included 7 members and a dog. The children were Isabel, the youngest at 3 years old, Sophia, who was 8, Ines, 11, and Gabriel, who was 14. The parents, though busy with work, maintained a close relationship with their children and treated them well. Josephine, the mother, was a loving and caring woman who worked hard to provide comfort for her family and manage the household. Caring for children from toddler to teenager is a challenging task because the needs of children at each stage are different. The father often had to go on business trips to Hong Kong, resulting in frequent absences from home. 8-year-old Sophia Urrutia, a girl attending a Catholic elementary school where she was loved by all her classmates and teachers. Sophia was well-mannered, naturally tactful, inquisitive. She helped her mother and took care of her younger sister. Sophia had many hobbies, including painting and dancing. Her uncle, who lived with them, often helped with the children and frequently took them on outings. On June 26, 2006, the kids eagerly await a trip to the mall. Little do they know that a dangerous force is also at work there. It was a regular weekday. The uncle picked up the children after school, and they went to the local shopping center, Leamington. It was a small shopping area, but it had everything local residents needed. 3 children were with their uncle, 14 years old Gabriel, 11 years old Ines, and 8 years old Sophia. During their walk, Sophia excitedly shared that she had been chosen to perform an interesting Indonesian dance. She was thrilled and proud, and her uncle and siblings praised her. While at the shopping center, Sophia needed to use the restroom and informed them at the checkout. Being familiar with the shopping center, her uncle allowed her to go alone while they finished unpacking and paying for their items. The restroom wasn't far, and Sophia ran off by herself. The uncle watched her until she entered the restroom, not realizing it would be the last time he saw her alive. After paying, they left the store and went to wait for Sophia outside the restroom, but she took longer than expected. Concerned, the uncle moved closer to call out to her, but there was no response. He didn't enter the women's restroom, so he sent Gabriel and Ines to check both the women's and men's restrooms. Ines knocked on the women's door, but there was no answer. Gabriel checked the men's restroom, but it was silent. They also tried the nearby disabled restroom, where they heard some noise, but a male voice responded that it was occupied, scaring them away. Worried, Gabriel and Ines thought Sophia might have exited through another door, possibly heading to a restaurant or becoming lost in the shopping center. Sophia's uncle waited in the hallway, while the rest searched for her around the shopping center. After 10 minutes, Gabriel couldn't wait any longer and went back to the toilets to call out to her, thinking she hadn't heard him. As he approached the disabled toilet, the door suddenly swung open. A tough-looking guy, about 20 years old, emerged. Their eyes met briefly, and Gabriel instinctively felt something was wrong. Gabriel immediately noticed Sophia's discarded school uniform in the waste bin. He moved closer and saw a lifeless, naked body on the floor. By then, the guy had already run down the corridor and was out of sight. Gabriel rushed to Sophia, but she showed no signs of life. He began to scream in the toilet. The uncle and the other children who were with Sophia at the mall that day quickly arrived at the scene. The police were called immediately, and mall security was notified. The entire mall was closed. Top doctors confirmed the girl's death. They couldn't save her. Forensic experts sealed the toilet and began examining the crime scene to ensure no important evidence was damaged or lost. Gabriel, who witnessed the criminal, was able to describe him, prompting police to search the mall for the suspicious man who had emerged from the handicapped restroom. During their initial search, the police could not locate him within the premises and assumed he had already escaped. The public was shocked by the brutal crime that had taken place. In what seemed like a safe, quiet place, no one imagined that letting a child go to the toilet could result in losing them forever. This murder would later be deemed the most brutal in Western Australia's history due to the horrific nature of the crime and Sophia's injuries. Unfortunately, the CCTV cameras in the corridor were not working that day. At the time, detectives only had a description provided by Gabriel, which was clearly insufficient. The crime was committed with horrifying brutality. The child, Sophia, died from suffocation. The attacker not only cut off her air supply but also squeezed her neck so forcefully that her larynx was completely crushed. Her arms were dislocated, and she suffered severe injuries and ruptures due to forced sexual assault. The forensic expert concluded that the attack lasted about 5 minutes, during which the attacker brutally harmed she. Even the most seasoned detectives, who regularly deal with various crimes, also described the case as the most serious they had ever encountered. Sophia had no reason to use the disabled toilet. It was possible that she was quickly dragged inside by someone. The criminal was probably already inside, waiting for a victim, and Sophia was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, becoming an unintended victim. She was seized so suddenly that she didn't have time to scream. The attacker immediately began strangling her. She stood no chance against an adult man and couldn't even call for help, even though her relatives were nearby and heard nothing. Investigators began compiling a list of all sex offenders in the area and questioned shopping center employees using a portrait of the suspect. It was urgent to find the criminal because panic was spreading throughout the city. People were terrified by the brutal attack on a young girl and were afraid to go outside. Several shopping center employees recognized the man in the portrait as 21 years old Dante Wyndham Arthurs. He is fat, looks very pale, and worked as a packer of vegetables and fruits at one of the stores in the shopping center. On the day of the incident, Dante was on shift but then disappeared. The police became interested in him and checked his criminal history. They discovered that 3 years prior to this murder, he had been arrested for sexually assaulting another 8-year-old girl. At that time, the police lacked sufficient evidence to charge him, so he was released. Early the next morning, around 5 o'clock, detectives, knowing Dante's address, went to his home, where he lived with his parents, just a short distance from the shopping center. They interrogated Dante and searched his residence. During the search, investigators discovered a sports bag containing latex gloves, handcuffs, rope, a knife, and several photographs with personal information. The oldest girl in the photos was 15 years old, and the others were younger. Some photos included details such as names, ages, home addresses, and the shortest routes to reach them using public transport, suggesting he was stalking these girls and planning attacks. However, Sophia was not among these photos. Within hours, Dante was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, as well as sexual assault and forcible detention of Sophia. Dante Wyndham Arthurs was born on August 8, 1984, in Western Australia. His family soon moved to the UK, where they lived for 8 years before returning to Australia. As a teenager, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a condition marked by difficulties with social communication and repetitive, obsessive behavior. During questioning, he neither confirmed nor denied his guilt and did not take the events seriously. He described the situation as if he were an outsider watching the horrific crime occur. He was unable to provide details or explain his motives, suggesting it felt as if the actions were not his own. Furthermore, Dante could not specify whether the sexual assault happened before or after the murder. This detail was crucial because, in Western Australia, sexual assault on a deceased person is not classified as a crime. He claimed his intent was to rape Sophia, but he never meant to kill anyone. Sophia's relatives were shocked by the police's negligence and blamed them for allowing the dangerous criminal to remain free. They pointed out that in 2003, investigators ignored crucial evidence that showed Dante was dangerous. If that evidence had been addressed and he had been held accountable, Sophia would not have encountered him in the restroom that day, and she would still be alive. It was revealed that Dante wasn't even listed among the most dangerous criminals prone. However, this was not Dante's second crime. In 2001, while on vacation with his family, Dante was arrested for sexually assaulting a young girl in another country. However, due to insufficient evidence, he was released, and no information about the incident was shared with the local police. Before Sophia's murder, Dante stalked at least 10 other girls. Later, the public began discussing new disturbing information about the murder of another child. This was the infamous case of 2-year-old James Bulger, brutally murdered on February 12, 1993. His mother had briefly left him unattended behind the door of a butcher's shop in a shopping center in Liverpool, UK. She didn't intend to stay long as she was just picking up an order, but there was a mix-up, delaying her return. When she came out, her son was missing. She immediately began searching and called the police. James's body was discovered 2 days later. A train had passed over him, but he had died beforehand. A forensic expert identified 42 injuries on James's body, including 10 skull fractures. Because of the numerous injuries, it was impossible to determine which one caused his death. It was later discovered that James had been noticed by two 9-year-old boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, who had skipped school that day. They aimlessly wandered around the shopping center, committing several petty thefts. Upon seeing James, they decided to have some fun with him. They forcibly took him away and brutally assaulted him, hitting him with a 10-kilogram iron bar. They kicked, trampled, and threw bricks and stones at him and poured paint on his face. When they saw James was no longer moving, they dragged him to the railroad tracks and left him to die, hoping to disguise the murder as an accident. The crime was quickly solved thanks to CCTV footage from the shopping center, which showed James being taken away, leading to the arrest of John and Robert. They had previously attempted to kidnap another child in a shopping mall, but the mother quickly intervened and saved the child. It was found that after James left the shopping center, they were seen by 38 people along the way. Passers-by observed they forcefully dragging the child. They claimed that James was their younger brother, and they told others they were taking him to the police station because he was lost. No one intervened in the situation. Investigators suspect the crime was not sexual in nature since the child was not wearing underwear, but the examination could not confirm this for certain. Robert Thompson and John Venables denied any sexual abuse of James but were unable to clearly explain why they undressed the child. John and Robert were sentenced to imprisonment for an indefinite period, meaning they would remain in prison until authorities determined they were no longer a threat to society, with a minimum sentence of 10 years. However, due to public pressure, their minimum sentence was increased to 15 years in July 1994. In 1997, the House of Lords overturned this decision, reducing the minimum sentence back to 10 years. Consequently, they served only 8 years in prison and were released in June 2001. By their release, they had completed secondary and advanced level education. While in prison, they suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, with John frequently experiencing nightmares about James. Importantly, they were given new identities and guaranteed complete anonymity. Any publications revealing their new identities or showing their photographs were officially prohibited. The authorities believed they deserved a second chance at a normal life, and this measure was also taken for their safety, as it was feared that the public might harm them. The public was outraged by the lenient punishment and the protection of their identity. People wanted to know their names and whereabouts to avoid any potential danger. There was skepticism about their ability to reform, which proved justified. On March 2, 2010, John was sent back to prison for storing and distributing explicit photos of children. He received a 2-year sentence and was released in February 2018. Then, he to be charged again. John faced charges for possessing explicit child photos, leading to a 40-month prison sentence. There were reports that he might receive a new identity and undergo plastic surgery at the state's expense to keep his identity hidden, a move James's parents strongly opposed. In July 2019, UK authorities discussed the possibility of relocating him to Canada, Australia, or New Zealand, as maintaining his anonymity in the UK had become too costly. There is almost no information about Robert Thompson. The only known fact is that he was forbidden from communicating with John and was relocated. It is unknown whether he reformed or returned to crime like John. After the murder of Sofia Urrutia, many suspected that Dante, who killed Sofia in a restroom, was actually Robert Thompson with a new identity. He received help with relocation and confidentiality, and many details of their biographies matched. Dante lived in Great Britain for 8 years, coinciding with the time of James's murder. In both cases, the victims were found in a shopping center. It is believed there was a sexual motive, and the victims were of a similar age and appearance. However, this theory could not be confirmed. The police denied any connection. The public suspects the denial was due to confidentiality. Many continue to believe they are the same person and consider him very dangerous. The year after Sophia's murder in March, Dante did not plead guilty to any charges. Consequently, the police reduced the charge from premeditated murder to simple murder, which carries a lighter sentence. Additionally, the sexual assault charge was dropped due to the inability to prove it occurred before Sophia's death. This situation highlights the sometimes absurd nature of the Western Australian legal system. Detectives allegedly obtained a confession from Dante, but none of the interrogations were properly recorded, so they could not be used as evidence. At the trial, due to public pressure, Dante was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 13 years. However, he was able to reduce his time on parole. According to the laws at the time of his conviction, Dante was eligible for early release by 2019, with his case reviewed every 3 years. Each time, there is a chance for him to receive a pardon. The next review of Dante's case occurred in 2022, but it was decided to keep him in prison until at least 2025. The family of Sophia and the public hope that Dante, monster, remains incarcerated for life, seeing him as a danger to others.